The training reason is so that the dog's clear. It doesn't have to decide where it's going to bite you. It's going to bite there, and it's going to stay there. We want the dog to hit there because those are pain-compliant areas. If a dog's biting you in the bicep, it's going to hurt like hell. But it's going to also have the least amount of damage. We don't want the dog thrashing, tearing, destroying all that muscle mass.
So I'm excited about this one, and I'm really glad we got the opportunity to come out last night and watch you guys train. So you've got Belgian Malinois, is that right?
Yep.
2 of them?
Yep. 2 Malinois. Yeah. One technically, depending on who you talk to in the industry, but the black one is probably partial Dutch Shepherd, which to me, they're all Malinois. They're just different colors, but
really
Dutch Shepherds, Malinois.
Yeah. So you'd been telling us to come out and watch you guys train and get bit. And, it's something we finally got to do yesterday. We brought Jess and a couple of my kids out, and we got to watch you guys. And I was blown away right from the start at I see dogs like that. I mean, quite honestly, they're very intimidating dogs. If I'm just at your house or I'm somewhere and I'm just around dogs like that, like, they come with that kind of scary reputation. Like, is it just going to go off and bite you? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Are they stable? And I'm sure there's probably some of that comes by, honestly, just with people who have those dogs who haven't put the training in and don't have the command and the control. I mean, then at that point, probably they can be scary. But what I saw was absolutely unbelievable with the control that you guys had, especially with your older dogs, but even the younger ones that you had said some of those people were a little less experienced, younger dogs.
Yeah.
Watching you guys just warm your dogs up at a heel, telling them to lay down, to sit, stay. Even the way that you guys back your dogs up, like telling them back, and those dogs were almost like crawling on their bellies practically, but they were so eager to please. I want to get into all your military stuff and whatnot, but like I'm intrigued by this dog training thing. So when you get a dog, what are the first steps as a puppy with a working dog, and maybe just kind of start off here a little bit. I'm talking a lot right now, but start off a little bit with just telling us like what maybe the history of the working dogs are and how you got into it, and then maybe we can go into kind of how you train them.
Sure. Yeah. Kind of a interesting story. I kind of just fell into it with no intention to do what I'm doing now. I was kind of in and out with deployments and schools and all kinds of different stuff with the military for a long time early on in my career, and we finally got to a point, my wife and I, where we, with me being gone, we didn't have animals or anything, and it was kind of a missing part of our lives, and so we kind of hit stability. We were in a house that had a nice yard and so on and so forth. So the situation lent itself to getting a dog and kind of filling that void. And well, my wife, Googling, Instagram, whatever, found these Belgian Malinois. They're cute. They're cool.
Were they puppies?
They were. And so, well, actually, she just found the breed. I was excited about the breed. I was like, okay, Kristen wants a Belgian Malinois. So, well, I'll get her one for Christmas, because it was like November or something like that when we decided to do that. And then a friend of my brother-in-law's, a coworker of my brother-in-law's, was breeding a litter. And so he set me up, and I got on the list. And I think the dogs were born in January or something like that, and I put pictures of Malinois in a box or something, gave it to Kristen for Christmas. But I knew right away we'd made a decision that we were not prepared for.
Yeah.
And so luckily, a gal that I grew up with, I was good friends with her brother, was going to law school with Kristen, and her husband, Chris, is a professional trainer and specializes in working K9's stuff, Malinois. He had Oaken at the time, the Dutch Shepherd you saw yesterday.
Yep.
And I just got in with him. I'm going to need some training. I have no idea what I'm doing. We had bird dogs that were mainly pets growing up.
Yeah.
We didn't put any training on them, but just genetics, and take them out bird hunting. They did their thing, and it was cool. But so yeah, I take him out. I get the puppy at 8 weeks old, Hans, the older one. And
we'll put some video up here, because we got We actually got to, let Hans actually bite us yesterday in the bite suit, and he's a cool dog for sure. Really cool. And how old is he now? So how long has this been since you got him when he was a pup?
Hans is 4. He's almost 5. He'll
Okay.
turn 5 in January.
Okay.
So
you get him as a pup.
Yep. And I take him out to Chris, and I think, I'm just going to learn how to get this dog to behave itself, sit, stay, not jump on people, all the normal pet stuff.
Yeah.
That you just want an animal to behave. And Chris brings out a little flirt pole and a chamois, which is something we use for puppies and bite development to kind of see where they're at. He plays with this dog for a little while, and he's like, you're going to have to do more. You're going to have to start coming out, and you're going to have to do bite work with this dog. I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, I'm going to do whatever this guy tells me to do because I have no clue what I'm doing. And
yeah.
I want this dog to be a good pet and so on and so forth. Well, one thing leads to another. Fast forward 5 years, we're competing in the upper levels of protection sports. Chris and I are now partners in a business training these dogs, and it's just kind of funny how one thing leads to another. But went from a hobby that I was doing to make sure my dog was well behaved to kind of a part-time job.
That's really surprising to me. I figured that you'd probably had dogs before Hans. I mean, with him only being, would you say 4, 5?
Yep, about 4.5.
As a high a level as the training appears to be with those dogs yesterday, it surprises me that that's your first dog. Like I would have expected you'd said you'd had a dog for, maybe a dog before these dogs. So that's really young. I mean, that's a dog really just getting into its prime at that point. Like, has really entered its full prime. And like, if I think about a hunting dog, I mean, they can really get going and be doing some stuff at 2 years old. But I mean, by the time they're 4 and 5, they're really becoming more wise. It feels like problem solving, and they're starting to really
their levels of those levels of maturity are very tangible at those ages for sure. Yeah.
So how do you? And I have some cell phone video that I'll maybe have Henry share over the top of this that just shows some of the control aspects, because the bite thing and all that is cool, but to me just as amazing, or maybe even more so, because the bite thing really is their DNA.
Yep, definitely.
But the control of the commands, how do you develop that at a young age? Because it's also amazing to me, and maybe it's just how those dogs are, but those dogs are looking to you guys with like this look on their face of like, please give me a command, give me something to do. Like, I want to do whatever you tell me to do. How do you develop that in a young dog?
Yeah, ideally, we start right away at 8 weeks old. Kind of as soon as they're ready to go home. Right, we like to begin with puppy imprinting. And we start to code their minds right then. That's, we call it imprinting. It's probably one of the most influential parts of their life. And we like to establish a learning language with them and kind of condition them for the rest of their lives, right? So you put that foundation on them. And then there's a couple different approaches, and every dog's a little bit differently, but maybe 8 to 16 weeks old, something like that. It's all imprinting. It continues after that for sure.
What's that imprinting look like?
It's just it begins how you're going to communicate with them, how you're going to train them. And it always evolves and adapts, but, we teach just simple games using food, using toys, trying to make them confident, going over odd objects. So, kind of my foundation was a lot of luring them with food, kind of shaping behaviors. It's kind of evolved now to where we kind of like to free shape their behaviors, let them kind of through self-discovery, find their advantage and reward.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really the most powerful if you can do that. But it's kind of a mix at the beginning. You got to show them a little bit, help them a little bit, but then hopefully they're taking things on and being independent. And
is everything positive reinforcement, or, do you ever spank a dog? Do you ever, paddle his ass if he pees in the house, or if he does something, chew something up he shouldn't? How do you handle that 3 or 4 months old to 10 months old?
It's tough. We use the full spectrum of operant conditioning, meaning we'll use positive punishment if it's required, but really we kind of try and find ways to motivate the dog to do the right thing, or, you know, just if they're doing something wrong, peeing in the house, chewing on something they're not supposed to, we just make it really unexciting. You know, it's just not a rewarding aspect, and we redirect that energy into something that is rewarding and something they can do for the most part. Now, if they're going to hurt themselves or hurt somebody else or run out into traffic, by all means, that's where we've got, you know, the line, and we'll provide a correction to keep everybody safe, to include them.
Mm-hmm. So as they get older, that's like a shock collar or something like that.
And really we communicate with shock collars. We call them e-collars, shock out, you know, the industry. But it's normally stim to go. So really low level stim using negative reinforcement, which is a good example is driving down the road without your seatbelt on and the dinging noise. Well, you click your seatbelt, it turns that off. So that's negative reinforcement. So we use kind of the same thing with the e-collar, is stim to go. I'm starting to tap that e-collar. It's a tap on their neck, and it's priming their mind to be ready to do.
So that's such an interesting thing. You kind of said that to me yesterday, and I was actually thinking quite a bit about it last night. I have a young lab that just came back from training pretty much all summer. Mm-hmm. And Hank and I took her out last night down by the pond. We were throwing some dummies for her and working with her a little bit. And I had her e-collar on her, and she's a pretty soft-hearted, like a lot of labs are. She's not real hard-headed, but she's got a ton of drive, got a ton of energy, right? And she wants to go. And so a couple times it's got a vibrate mode on her, mm-hmm. where it just vibrates on her neck, and it's basically just gets her attention.
Yeah.
And it was amazing because there was a couple times where she was getting a bit squirrely. I throw a dummy, she's wanting to kind of break. I'd hit that vibrator, and she'd stop and come back, you know, and kind of tuck her tail, almost like you shocked her.
Okay.
But you didn't. And that's the way that you guys are using it, and it's got me wondering if, like, in the retriever lab world, if I've learned wrong or misunderstood it or whatever, but like you're actually using it as a, like, hey, we're about to do what you want to do here, of like getting their mind right and getting their mind focused, like breaking them out of being crazy and like all of a sudden, like, bam, what are we going to do?
Right.
Where it seems like the e-collar, the vibrate, or the tone that people will use, a lot of times has always been done when it's something negative.
Correct. Yeah. And for the most part, you know, it seems most pet trainers, people that, and granted, we've had a lot of formal instruction on this, you know, so it's not something that is easy to do or learn or apply by any means. But yeah, I think a lot of people use the e-collar as a positive punishment correction when the dog's doing something you don't want them to. And, you know, I think that stems from a lot of pet training, generally speaking, is don't do training. You don't want the dog to jump up on somebody when they come through the door. You know, you don't want the dog to chew stuff up, so on and so forth. Whereas we're taking these working dogs, same with the hunting dogs, and you want them to do stuff. So it's training to go. And so that's where we kind of adapt and through our education, find ways to use that as a tool to motivate the dog.
So if you were to hit vibrate and throw a dummy, hit vibrate, throw a dummy,
mm-hmm.
right? She's realizing all of a sudden, because right now it's kind of tuck her tail, ears come down like, whoa, shit, right? But instead it would be more of a like, whoa, vibrate, like, what the hell, let's go. I'm ready to go.
Yep, it's like
game on.
Yep, slapping the football player in the butt before he runs into.
Where maybe then if you give him a bit of an electric nick, you know, a small shock, that's more of probably the negative reinforcement, or,
you know, it kind of depends on how you want to define it. There's no one set way. Where we like to get to is the only difference between negative reinforcement and positive punishment. It's set at the same level. The stimulus is exactly the same. It's just timing. So if I do it before, you know, I'm trying to send Hans out into a guard or into a bite, I'm going to give him a quick, you know, tap, stim to go. So he goes and performs the behavior. Now, if he breaks a position that I wanted him to stay in, now I'm giving him feedback because he broke that position. So it's just timing.
Mm-hmm.
So you know, the communication ends up being the same, but is it before the event or after the event? Did they do what they were supposed to do or not? And then it's just if you've trained it well enough, which I'd, you know, sometimes I feel like I've done a really nice job, and sometimes I feel like I haven't at all.
But that's what's cool about it, right? Like they are a, quote unquote wild animal. I mean, they have their own mind, and
yep,
they have their off days, and
they do. Yep.
Yeah,
they definitely do.
Yeah.
So came out. They were on
you
yesterday.
Can use the
so
same.
Nice.
You can use the same vibrate or tone or whatever for getting them ready to go, as much as telling them no, that's not correct. Yep. You can use that same thing.
Yep. It's just the same level of communication. And at the end of the day, it's just focus on what I'm telling you to do.
So if you're using that, let's say you tell him to guard and he goes in and goes up to bite or goes in for a bite, and you hit maybe vibrate or something. Are you saying no, guard, or are you following that up with verbal communication?
Yep. Trying to want to bridge that gap, make it as clear as possible. They've got a lot of noise in their brains when they're in drive like that, and it's just a process where, they're going to want to go up and bite. That's going to be their first instinct, because that's the highest level reward for them. So if he makes the mistake, he's going to go in for a bite, a little bit of stimulation, and redirect it into the proper behavior so that you can help kind of channel his brain and help him think more clearly.
Yeah. So how do you, once you start getting through the obedience stuff, are you building in the bite stuff at that same time and just kind of amping it up? And how do you do that?
But, for the most part, what we like to do is, take nice dogs as puppies, and we kind of like to build the beast, bring out all of the beauty of their genetics in bite and drive. And because the more we tap into those drives and bring those out at a younger age, the more we've got to shape in their adolescence and adulthood. So, we do put on a fair amount of obedience and control to a point, but it really depends on the dog as to what level you do that when they're young. People refer to it as capping. You don't want to cap them too soon. Kind of yes and no. It depends. Just like,
so maybe meaning you take some of the drive out of them, and maybe you shouldn't, depending on what their job's supposed to be down the road.
Yeah, and so in the sport we participate in, they face really high pressure situations. And so we need them to be confident and be able to fully embrace both their drive and prey and drive and defense and work through very challenging situations. So we normally kind of extend that period out as long as we can before we start kind of capping that and implementing a lot more control, like you saw in the adult dogs yesterday.
So what I didn't see yesterday, and you had a gal there that was going to work on some detection stuff, and we didn't see that. We had left, but how does the detection training differ from what do you call it? Protection training or
protection, bite training?
Bite training.
Protection work. But it's the same training foundation. At its core, we train it the exact same way. The difference is that, we like it. It's a nice balance for the dog. It allows them to work very independently. If you're doing detection work and tracking, if you're doing it right, arguably, you're letting the dog do its own thing. You're letting the genetics, and granted, you do have to put some training into that to get them to the point where they're doing it effectively. But once they're out there, you're staying out of their way. You're letting the dog do it, and you're just following the dog, letting them do their thing. And so it's great because it allows the dog to work independently of you. It's a confidence exercise. It's something that really speaks to their genetics as well. So it's fun to watch and be a part of and train. But it's a nice pairing to, it's a little bit different drive.
Mm-hmm.
Where you see him just totally geeked out in bite, shaking, getting ready to launch into the decoy.
Yeah.
Versus in tracking and detection, you see that calm head, and it's still very active drive, but just a different state of mind.
Can you train or have you, like with Hans, to do both? Or is he completely a bite dog versus like a detection dog?
He's primarily a bite dog. We have done some tracking with him. It's more of just a time thing. I'd love to do both, kind of a 50-50 or 70-30, being engaged with tracking. But
so like a police force dog could be out on patrol, or you could take them in a potential situation where you've got to put a bite on, but then maybe that dog could also be trained on drugs.
Yep, definitely. And good portion of them are dual purpose detection and patrol, as they would call it.
Financially, that probably makes a lot of sense, especially with a smaller police force with a limited budget where, maybe you can't afford to have two dogs, all the training for two dogs where you can combine it all into one.
Yeah, I think so. Because the dog upfront cost is a lot, but then the training, thereafter is the biggest thing as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, having one that can do both, we think, is ideal. But there's departments that have single-purpose dogs and dual-purpose dogs, and I think a lot of it depends on the demand for the county or the city that they work within.
Mm-hmm.
What do they need to support their work? But
what breeds of dogs do you see? I'm sure with you having Malinois, you're partial towards them, and obviously we all know that they're definitely a high drive dog designed for that. But I also saw somebody out there had a German Shepherd. What breeds of dogs do you consider the best for what you guys are doing?
Definitely the Malinois is my preference because of the level of drive. But it's kind of the Shepherds are great as well. If you get a really nice German Shepherd, they can do everything a Malinois can do. It seems like a little bit of a personal choice. Do you want a Ford or do you want a Chevy?
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, if you're getting a nice genetic dog, they can both do the same thing.
Shepherds are interesting because I had a couple close friends growing up forever that had Shepherds, Shepherds that got old and died, and then they got more Shepherds, and a couple people. And those particular dogs were so family-oriented, house dog type situation that I never got the feeling that those dogs were ever even capable of doing anything mean. They were just so sweet and kind. But then obviously you see tons of Shepherds out there working. Do you see the same level of difference like that in the Malinois breed, or do they tend to just be more higher drive, or can they be a real calm family dog? Yeah,
I think you can see the full spectrum. There's definitely kind of pet speed Malinois, just like there's pet speed Shepherds. And we see a fair amount of that sometimes where people bring their dog in and they'll want to work it in protection. And it's like, well, it's a really nice dog, but it probably doesn't have the drive needed to do this sport, And so, it just kind of depends on how they're bred.
You even see that in bird dogs.
Oh, yeah.
A lab that he's a nice little house dog, but he doesn't really give a shit about getting after it.
Yep, they're all different. And on the flip side of that, we've got a German Shepherd that works with our group that I call it it's a Malinois trapped in a German Shepherd's body.
Really?
He's just a banger of a Shepherd. He's super cool. Very, very good genetics in that dog.
What other breeds would there be that maybe are you seeing bite training, if any?
Sometimes you'll see the pit bulls compete in the sport and find success. There's some Mastiffs, Cane Corsos. They're rare, but people get into their breed and they want to compete with what they like, and they're able to train and find success. And
at competition, is it generally always pretty much Malinois and Shepherds?
For the most part, yeah, probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 90+%, and then you might have one or two off breeds in in a competitive field of 65 teams, something like that.
Really? Yeah.
So the sport's very difficult, the training and so I think a lot of people are, well, that dog was bred to do this. Why not make it any harder on myself?
Right.
Is at least my thought process. But
let's talk about the competition. What because yesterday was the first time I've ever been exposed to any of this. I do find podcasts interesting. I'm listening to Mike Ritland's podcast, Mike Drop podcast, and he was a dog handler in the military. He has a really cool business where he takes working dogs that have been retired or injured that really aren't fit to go to a family. Mm-hmm. Maybe they've been retired. They can have some PTS. They can just be super high drive dogs, and they're just not able to get them to a situation where they're trustworthy to go anywhere but basically in a kennel. And so instead of euthanizing those dogs, he actually works with those dogs and keeps them until they're into their life. It's a really cool program that and then he'll take some of those dogs over a couple of years of bringing them back down, kind of getting them reacclimated to, kind of society a little bit. And then he'll place them with certain individuals that seem to be a fit.
That's very cool.
Yeah. But on his podcast, he's had, of course he has a lot of dog handlers from the military world as well as police forces. And, it's amazing to hear those stories, but I kind of want to hear what do those competitions look like? How long are they, and how do they set those up?
So they, for our sport, Protection Sports Association, they're 2-day or 3-day events primarily. If it's a 3-day event, you start with just the lowest entry or lowest level to the sport, and it's called a Protection Dog Certificate. And the day's broken down. Morning is all obedience. You have to pass obedience and demonstrate certain tasks and capabilities before you can move on to protection. Really, that control is what they want to see. And then, so there's PDC 1, 2, and 3. The last competition I went to was down in Salt Lake a couple weeks ago. They did PDCs on Friday, and then 1, 2, and 3 on Saturday, Sunday. And, the morning starts out, each level goes through level 1, obedience, which is attention healing, doing some position changes, figure-8ing cones. Dog has to be neutral or indifferent to a lot of stuff all over the field. Mass, there's a decoy on the field. And so they're really testing a lot of your training. And it's difficult because oftentimes you'll have great training off the trial field. You'll step on the trial field and it's a whole nother ball game, different stimulus, and all of a sudden the dog is dropping its head. It's not doing a lot of the things that it's being asked to do. So it is a true test, and it's very difficult at every level. Hans competes in the 2s right now. Yoda competes in the level 1s. And then a couple weeks ago, a good friend of ours, I got to see close out his level 3 with a German Shepherd that he has done an excellent job with, obviously, but he's the 37th person to ever close out a level 3 in the sport, which is
really
pretty special.
And there's not even a level 4?
Nope, level 3 is it.
And they just good job.
Retire the dog,
Really?
If you want to continue to compete as well. But
so level 2s, what are they asking Hans to do in a level 2 competition?
Level 2, they're going to be really challenging his neutrality to stimulus during obedience. So he's got.
What do you mean by that?
So the decoys are going to be trying to get him to bite them.
Okay, so if you put him on guard, they'll be. Is that a situation where then they're trying to get him to bite, or are you talking some other situation?
Yeah, so he's going to be primarily healing with me. I leave him away from me a couple of times through that obedience routine, but they're just going to be kind of agitating him. They're just going to be providing stimulus to test how well we've trained his neutrality, making sure that he knows that this is not a situation where we're going to bite. You're not going to bite until I tell you you're going to. So he's got nothing on him, not even a collar, not a leash, nothing. He's out there naked, and I've got to hold his attention heel, and there's basically 2 decoys walking with me, talking to me, trying to do anything they can to distract me or the dog to lose points as in the scored events or to get him to break his position and bite one of them.
Do they at a certain point push you, try to rough you up a bit? Like if the dog sees you being, say, tackled, right, and wrestled to the ground, or something like that, is that a situation where that dog's sees that and is defensive of you? Is he allowed to bite in that situation?
In protection, should he make it through obedience, which, he's at about 50-50 right now.
Yeah.
In protection, you'll see stuff like that where, they'll attack the handler.
Is that a level 2? Or
Level
is that
2.
3? Okay.
Yep. They'll attack the handler, to simulate that, and he's got to come to your defense in some scenario-based stuff. But in obedience, they're going to keep what they refer to as a 3-foot bubble. Okay. They're not going to touch me as the handler or anything like that. They're just going to
yell at you and
provide agitation and
wave their arms and
and the decoys are great. So they're primarily big personality guys. They're pretty funny.
Yeah.
And so they're poking fun at you. It's hard not to laugh because they're putting on a show, and it's pretty fun. They're kind of like rodeo clowns in a sense.
Really?
But yeah, it's fun. And a lot of them end up being close friends. So you're out there with your buddy who knows a lot about you, and he's making fun of you. And
Right.
A buddy of mine from Colorado did the carjacking scenario for me a couple of years ago. Of course, he knows I'm a pilot. He knows I'm in the military. I have the mustache. You have to.
Yeah.
And so I think Maverick had just come out,
Mm-hmm.
so he had all kinds of fresh material to poke fun at me at as he's coming in to do the scenario and work the dog.
The Top Gun.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's funny. So, and that's all in level 1. That's all obedience is level 1.
So each level does obedience in the morning and protection in the afternoon.
Okay.
And so basically the 1 is a huge step up in obedience from the PDC, and then the 2 is another huge step up just with the level of distraction and stimulus that they're throwing at you and the dog to try and pull them out. So the 3 is its own world. So it's a scenario that isn't scripted in any capacity. The PDC 1 and 2, the rule book kind of generally lays out how that's going to go, especially in the PDC 1. It's a pretty set pattern for obedience, small variables that change. Same with even the 2. The pattern is the same. Now, what the decoys do and what the judge has them do to provide distractions can change and vary. But the level 3 is completely dreamed up out of the judge's head. It's a scenario that they come up with to be just an extreme challenge. Nothing you can prepare for per se. And before we even started in today, that's kind of where we get into, you don't want to train for any one variable in particular. You need to train for, or you need to have such a strong foundation in training that your training is going to overwhelm any variable that they could potentially throw at you.
Yeah.
Easier said than done.
Right.
For sure. But
right. Yeah, no, it's unbelievable. Like yesterday you had a couple of guys hiding kind of behind a big sign, and you kind of had the guy poke his head out a little bit. The dog saw they were back there, but then they disappear. What the dog didn't know is that there was a second person back there. And so the dog was not prepared for that. Not only that, but they had like a bunch of pop cans tied on strings together, maybe 6 or 8 rows of pop cans or beer cans that are probably all the beer cans from you guys is from like from the office.
I don't know where those would have come from.
When they must clean them out of the helicopters, probably.
I think they must have been donated from somebody.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, but when you sent that dog to go on its bite from probably 30 yards away, that dog comes kind of flying around that sign, and that guy kind of pops out, and the dog hits him. But at that same time, he's not hitting him, but he's kind of raking those beer cans and shaking those beer cans. It's super loud. I mean, on my video, and Henry, I'll get you these videos. We can put them over the top. But I mean, like even just me playing the video on my phone, it's really loud, very distracting, and would potentially for the wrong dog, for a young dog, be super intimidating.
Yep,
with that much noise and even just kind of those cans hitting their body and stuff. Not only that, now there's a second person, so now you feel, as a dog or as a human, you're at a disadvantage number-wise.
Definitely, yeah. It's a lot of defensive pressure.
Right, so now does he back up and like kind of bark at the two of you or look at you? But instead that dog, Hans, just went full on into that first person. How does the dog choose which person to attack in that situation? Or is it just the first one he comes to?
Yeah, just reflex response. It's something that we successively approximate and kind of layer in with a lot of other training scenarios that we put on him over, So, this is something that we've asked of him to do way far into his training. Nothing that we would ask of a young dog to do, especially that situation in particular is very challenging. And so you just have to break it down into a lot of other drills to where that they can kind of piece it together and, through that reflex response, just have a clear head to commit to do the thing when they're met with that situation. So
I found it interesting because as you guys were discussing what you were going to do throughout the day, you were telling your buddy there, like, I want to do this and that and whatnot, and I kind of want to try to muddy up his brain a little bit. I want to try to, kind of put a lot of things in there and make him basically have to sort through it. And I found it interesting that you guys are really trying to figure out scenarios for the more advanced dogs.
Sure.
And I'm sure it's that way at every level. It's just how much mud can you put in there, and
Exactly.
how easy is it for that dog to sort through. But it was cool to see you guys kind of talk through scenarios of like making that dog choose, or maybe it's even two people to go bite, and you send them to the one that's 20 yards to the right, and that's the one you're pointing at, while there's a guy standing 20 yards to the left. And it's just like with a retriever, if you throw two dummies out that are 20 yards from each other, and you send him to the one on the right, as he's running to the one on the right, they want to kind of look at the one on the left and maybe then veer off over there, or get the dummy and then run to the one over there. It's that's actually what I was working on a little bit last night with Ellie, that when she gets that first dummy, get that dummy and return as quickly as possible, get back to a heel, sit, and then send her for the second dummy. It's very similar.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just an exercise in helping them think in drive.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of have to, it's a continual thing, because you constantly are finding variables or stimulus that are keeping them in drive and preventing them from being able to hear you. So that's where we kind of started with kind of that two-man attack behind that blind, because that was really going to bring him out. He was going to be really just prayed out and muddied, and then we were going to really challenge his mind by doing some very simple behaviors like a retrieve around a decoy, and then like you mentioned, the directionals. Hey, go over this jump and send a guard. So now you're going full bore towards a decoy, but you're not going to bite.
Yeah. That was something I'd never seen before. I didn't even know that was a thing. Two things I saw yesterday, and we have video of this as well. It's not going to be super high quality video, but we actually should come out sometime with Henry and have him video you guys.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, put together a cool video. But the fact that you can send a dog on a guard, and that dog sprints to that person and sits down, 2 inches from that person's knees, and is looking straight up at them, basically right in the eye. That dog is looking at them and basically just waiting for that person to make the wrong move. But to guard and not bite, and really and I've heard about this on the Mic Drop podcast, those dogs are a huge liability for like a police force.
Sure.
Right? Because if you send a dog on a bite, it's much like if somebody steals a Snickers from a convenience store and runs out of the convenience store and a cop shoots him in the head, the first question is going to be like, well, was that the proper use of force?
Right.
Like, did you really need to shoot that guy for stealing a Snickers? Right. And much the same with dogs. Those dogs are that's a weapon as much as it is a gun, for sure. And to be able to send that dog on a guard, and not bite will probably very likely in most scenarios be enough to make that person stop doing whatever they're doing.
I think just activating the dog oftentimes is enough for most people, unless there's just a perp that is really messed up on some drugs or something like that. Anybody that's in any semblance of rational mind is probably going to want to, give up in the situation that they pull out the dog.
Yeah. The other thing that I saw you guys do that I'd never seen before was then the transport. So then you walk up, and I'm the guy in the suit. I'm the bad guy. You need to walk me to your cop car. That dog walked right along next to that perp, looking at him, basically ready at any point to bite if need be. But there again, if you're a cop and you're by yourself somewhere, and you're 5'8" and 165 pounds, and you're walking a dude that's 6'6" and 300 to your cop car in the dark,
it'd be nice to have that K9 partner there to
damn
back
right.
you up.
Like if that dog's not there, and I'm the dude that's 6'6", and I don't want to go to jail, like I'm probably not going to get in your car.
Right.
And you're, without shooting me, or tasing me, you're probably not going to keep me from getting you're not going to get me in your car. But that dog is absolutely, that's another thing that I heard these guys talk about in like in Afghanistan, Iraq, doing house, hitting a house or whatever. He specifically talked about a situation where they had some dudes in a house that would not come out, and they needed to talk to him, but it was a situation where they weren't going to just light the house up. Sure. And at a certain point, after tons of negotiations trying to get him to come out, they they brought the dog out and they said, hey, we're going to let this dog in this house if you guys don't come out through the translator. And he said those guys walked right out. Like
I think it's terribly effective, and that when we work with law enforcement and, we haven't had the pleasure to work with any military handlers yet. We worked with some of the military trainers in the past, but that's where we really try and coach and teach a lot of those non-lethal competencies that these dogs can do to really help and be an effective tool for them out on the street. And that prisoner transport, the send a guard, and then just the active guard, activating, alerting your dog, the barking is a whole other intimidation factor that you can add to your list of tools that, the dog doesn't need, you don't even have to send the dog for a bite.
No.
You don't have to pull out a weapon.
Well, he said those guys in that house know there's no Geneva Convention. There's no rules of engagement, like for the dog. Like the dog's a wild beast. Yep. And those guys know that if that dog comes in the house, if our guys go in the house, they have to act a certain way. They have certain protocols they have to go through before they can act. And our, people we're fighting against, they learn those rules real quick.
Yeah.
As you full well know. But, same thing, here at home, you know that officers have, frankly, their hands handcuffed so greatly. Yep. But you bring that dog out, like you're dealing with something here that is potentially, in your, especially as you're an uneducated American citizen, if it's me, I tend to basically think I'm looking at a very unstable beast.
Sure.
And I didn't even know that you guys could really call a dog off once they've bit.
Sure.
Like I thought, holy shit. I mean, once that dog's bit, like you might be dragging that dog off of that person.
And a real live bite is different than training. That's going to bring out a whole nother level of drive. Again, it depends on the dog, and you might have to. That's why they carry the break sticks, and they do have techniques to get the dog off. But in the event that anyone is going to send a dog, that's why we really teach things like targeting and the control that we like to lay over top of them, the ability to call the dog off if you've cut the dog loose and now all of a sudden the guy decided to give up after that moment. You should be able to call the dog off. So it's things like that it keeps that as a safe tool in law enforcement's pocket. And like a lot of things, it's scrutinized what they do day in and day out, unfortunately. But it helps them, right? Yeah. Keep that tool available.
Talk about the targeting, because that was something, I was nervous yesterday. I mean, I had seen it, and by the time we put the bite suit on, I had trusted what you guys were doing. But, you're standing there. I was standing there in a bite jacket, so my legs are totally exposed. My hands are exposed. My head and neck's exposed, right? And so you're trusting that dog to hit on a place that's safe.
Yep, definitely.
So why do you guys do that? How do you do that? And kind of maybe let people know, like, what are those areas you're trying to target?
Sure.
And why?
So we target bicep, tricep, and then a leg target. So either right above or below the knee, kind of depends on the dog's stature and where they're going to be the most comfortable to enter that strike. Excuse me. And then the back of the leg as well. So we do that for a lot of reasons. The training reason is so that the dog's clear. It doesn't have to decide where it's going to bite you. It's going to bite there, and it's going to stay there. Because, as we get into the broader discussion on targeting, we want the dog to hit there because those are pain-compliant areas. If a dog's biting you in the bicep, it's going to hurt like hell. But it's going to also have the least amount of damage. We don't want the dog thrashing, tearing, destroying all that muscle mass. I mean, you felt how much pressure that is in those teeth.
Yeah, through a big, thick suit.
We don't want the dog pulling, thrashing. We want the dog to stick the grip with a full mouth. So that's going to be the most PSI using the back of their mouth on that arm or that leg. And then we want the dog punching and staying right there. Because at the end of the day, you will have apprehended somebody with the minimal amount of damage possible.
Mm-hmm.
So they might have some puncture wounds in their arm, probably some horrible bruising and other stuff like that. But all things considered, they're going to come out of it maybe with some stitches, might even get away with just a bandage, but it was terribly effective.
Yeah.
And so in the eyes of the public, in the eyes of what the law enforcement officer or the military canine handler has to do after the fact. It's minimal medical care. You know, the guy earned what he got, and it was handled at the lowest possible use of force.
Yeah. Yeah, I did see yesterday you were talking about how, I think it was Hans, wasn't quite hitting the tricep with like a full mouth.
He's a little shallow. Yep.
Yep.
Something we'll work on there.
Yep. And I found it interesting that, like, those are just the little nuances, because, I mean, he was hitting hard and fast. Mm-hmm. He's aggressive. He's not scared, but he just wasn't, like, chomping with that full bite.
Definitely going to break down some of his mechanics. But, yeah, 90% there, just a little shallow on the grip. And those are, you always have things to work on.
Yep. At that point, you're finding little things to pick apart. I mean, very effective dog, but constantly just perfecting it. You know, my wife had a question for you, and, you know, I asked one, and it kind of led into this, but she didn't want you to answer it until it was on the podcast. So, sure. Jess, this one's for you. So I said, you know, what made me realize yesterday is really you can compare those guns a lot, or those dogs a lot, to a gun, mm-hmm. to a handgun, right? Sure. For a police officer. It's a tool that if you choose to use it, there's going to be a lot of questions asked about it. It can be a very effective tool, but it also can be deadly. It can be involve a lot of litigation and a lot of potential court cases that can come from it. Yeah. And you know, first, what it made me realize was basically you could take that dog anywhere that you're at, and depending on the scenario, basically point that dog at any potential person that you want to and send that dog. So it comes with owning one of those dogs comes with a great sense of you know, liability, respect, and responsibility. Responsibility. It's a huge responsibility, just like it is owning a gun. Definitely. And carrying a gun in your waistband. And you see people carrying pistols, carrying them in their waistbands, and the question really is like, are you completely competent? How much practice have you put in? Like, if you pull that gun and go to use it, are you going to potentially use it, you know, in a way that makes the situation worse? Right.
And being able to point and shoot and hit your target, and being able to make all the decisions prior to that are you know, their own animal.
Yeah. So owning one of these dogs is really very similar. If you pulled that dog out, if someone was robbing a store or something like that, and making sure that dog potentially bites the actual suspect, the right person. And then really where I'm leading into this is like that whole legal perspective. What rights do you have if you're at the grocery store gassing up, and you look in the convenience store and you see it being robbed by a guy and he's got a gun or whatever? Where is the line, and at what point, as you as a civilian are allowed to, because I'm discounting the fact that you're a pilot right now, because that really has no bearing on the fact of what's happening here. What right do you have to send that dog on a bite as just a civilian?
It's a good question. You know, and I think I'd kind of have to go through the same, you know, mental exercises, you know, if it was a gun, and, you know, you'd have to make a lot of decisions there very quickly, you know, and if it was a life or death situation where, hey, that convenience store attendant might lose their life if somebody doesn't intervene in whatever capacity, whether it's me with a dog or me with a gun or somebody else with any ability to assist in that situation, I think you have to think through that, and, you know, you're going to have to make a decision and live with it. And like you said, I don't know what the outcome of that is. You know, in terms of the legalities of it, you'd like to think that, you know, if you intervened in any capacity, whether with the dog or whatever, and were able to save somebody's life or injury or anything like that, then you would come out of it okay. But I guess you just never know. That's the thing. You know, everybody gets a vote at the end of those situations, and what might have seemed clear cut and the right decision, the most ethical decision to intervene and help out in a bad situation, it might come back on you. So, you know, it's hard to really say kind of yes or no. Would you do it? You know, every situation would be unique, but you'd sure like to think that if someone needed help, you know, you would apply the appropriate level of assistance, much like you would hope that somebody else would do for you. And then at the end of it, the public or the courts or whoever would would see that decision for what it is and support you in it. But there's a lot of things to consider, because it's not just, getting sued or, the injury that could be caused, but I could have put my dog in a situation where now they're going to be euthanized because of what they did.
Sure.
And so that kind of comes back to the initial point we were discussing, the responsibility you have in owning a dog like this. We train it for sport. They're our pets. We do work with law enforcement, the guys that apply it in real world situations. But what we kind of have to make sure people know and remember is that, these are our pets. They're friendly. You've been over to the house and they hang out, they're just like your dogs.
Yep.
They just happen to have the ability to do other things.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, it is so easy, and I think it's right to be able to really to compare them to owning a pistol, because they come with responsibility. My kids and I shot our guns out in the field this weekend. My 13-year-old, my 15-year-old, we're out shooting our AR, we're shooting our hunting rifles, pistols. And like most people, I'm going to own those tools my entire life, and very likely never use those against another person. Sure. And hope to God we never have to use those.
Oh yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
And so really the guns that I owned are mostly owned for sport. And there's this far outside chance that you would need to use it for home protection or self-defense or whatever. Right. Yep. Dogs, same exact concept.
Yeah,
what I would say though, with a dog where you have, would definitely be a little easier to send your dog is if you're standing at that gas station and you have two options. We have three. You can drive away, run from the situation, right, but potentially live with, an innocent person getting shot, right, or something that situation escalating more to where it's a mass shooting or whatever, right?
Right.
So I feel like with the training that you have between your dog and your military career and stuff, you kind of have, frankly, as a citizen, a duty to potentially intervene, depending on the situation. But the tool that you have that I don't have is you do have a non-lethal tool.
Yeah.
And that's where a dog, if I decide at a gas station, man, I need to do something, and I shoot the guy, and I'm going to very likely kill him. Mm-hmm. It's going to be a very unlikely scenario that you let your dog go and that person's going to die from your dog.
Right. Yeah. They might sustain some injuries, but yeah.
And
and I can kind of go through the same escalation of force that we might expect a law enforcement officer to do, where I pull the dog out and maybe that's enough.
Right.
You hope it is, but
right,
you never know.
Yep. And I will say it's this is a difficult one that I've heard a couple of pretty sad podcasts with dog handlers where those dogs are truly treated as a member of the team in the military.
Definitely.
In fact, the latest one I just listened to, they talked about some helicopter pilots flying in some medevac for a dog that had been shot in Afghanistan, and they risked their life for that dog.
Oh yeah.
The guy said, the way they came in, they landed under fire. They medevac that dog as if his name was Frank and he was,
absolutely
10-year vet. That being said, they're still not a human, right? And they talk about those dogs there at times are there to send in a situation where it's truly just too dangerous. There's a chance that if you send in one of your guys, they're going to get shot. And,
right,
like he said, likely they're, almost never, but do they ever send their dog in where there's a good chance they're going to get shot? That's always a chance. But, that's one of those scary situations where as a dog handler, they have to make this decision. It's well, I don't want to send my dog in, but does that mean Tommy has to go in?
That's a very challenging situation to be in. But at the end of the day, that, it might be what you get tasked to do.
Yeah.
Fortunately. And you always, I'm sure all those handlers would also tell you that they don't ever want to go in there, or they don't ever want to have to send the dog in there when they're not also going in to fight right along next to them. But,
right,
it's not a situation I've had to witness or be a part of. Fortunately, I've seen it on the medevac side, but, that's a very challenging situation that those guys have to face sometimes.
That particular podcast, he was talking about his dog that they sent him into a house. some combatants were in there, and much like a lot of those guys do, they push the women and children forward to basically shield themselves. And that dog, the dog handler didn't see it happen, but one of the guys that was on point, running point, saw it happen. Because, like you said, they entered the house with the dog. The dog went into the kitchen area, and they hadn't seen this when they had gone in, but in basically a pile of laundry was a baby. And that dog ran to that pile of laundry, gave the baby a quick sniff, went through the kitchen into the next room, past like 3 women and a child, and bit one of the combatants, took him down.
Oh, wow.
And they were talking about that level of, you want to talk about muddy in the brain.
Yeah.
Right? Like we were just talking about with your training yesterday.
Yeah, that's like a level 10, out of 10 in terms of difficulty, and that, that dog making a lot of good decisions.
Yeah, because that's just not something that you just can't train that down in a park on a Sunday.
It's impossible to, there's not a lot of people that have babies that are just willing to let you train bite dogs.
Yeah. No shit. Yeah. But it's even to bypass like an innocent woman or whatever, how would you train Hans to run past a woman and bite someone in a suit? And is that stuff that you guys have tried? Like in innocent, say a child in a convenience store and there's a combatant behind them.
Sure. That's not a scenario we've put together in training. Sometimes, we talk about it and we just don't always give the dogs enough credit for just how intelligent they are, just how well they understand a situation or go off of cues and understand kind of through other training, inadvertent consequences almost of, well, he saw that person, they were doing, this, they seemed innocent. They saw this guy, and this guy was giving him cues of a perp that he'd seen before. And so in that moment, he's making those decisions. I think there is just, not everybody would agree with this, but I think the dogs, have something else there.
There's a sense there.
Yeah, they're understanding things that we can't quite explain.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have any science to back that up, but it's just a feeling I get sometimes through training, especially those really high drive dogs that have a little bit of an emotional attachment to the handler. That seems to me there's a little bit of special sauce in there. That's a little bit different element that you'll see in the canine handler relationship. And, maybe some of that plays out in those situations. I don't know.
Yeah, it'd be interesting if you were down at the park and you had one of the gals standing there kind of just being quiet, standing there kind of frozen, and had, the dummy 20 feet behind him waving a plastic gun around and kind of making a scene and seeing if that dog would pass because there's a bite suit right between that person and the dog, and seeing if that dog would actually bypass that and go after the actual person who's making the biggest commotion.
I would think so.
Yeah,
I think that some of our higher trained dogs would be able to differentiate that, and it's something we work on. And some of that was layered into the directional things, and we do stuff with passive decoy. But yeah, it can start to become very tricky and challenging.
Do you guys train if they're waving a weapon around? Like if they have a gun, does that change to that dog? Like normally you said left bicep, left tricep. But if I've got a pistol in my hand, I'm waving that around. Does that dog recognize that and try to take that arm because of that?
Nope, they're still going to hit the same spot. That's where, ideally you're going to be in there with them to be able to disarm that person, and so that they don't shoot the dog or whatever they might be able to do. But yeah, they're always going to hit the exact same spot. There's even some stories out there of a dog's getting shot or stabbed, and they're trained well enough to where their reflex response to that pain, that pressure, whatever's being done to them, they continue to punch and hit harder into that arm.
Yeah.
But, and like we were saying, if the dog's biting somebody in a situation like that, and that person still has the capacity to fight them back, they're probably on some pretty serious drugs, because I mean, you felt it just through the suit yesterday, and
that's what I was saying. Like I don't think you hear people say like, well, I'd punch the dog, or I'd choke the dog or pry it off or whatever. Like I don't think people that say that have any idea. Like it's very intimidating. Even just like I was like, yeah, I'll throw the coat on. I watched Hank do it. Like, oh yeah, I'll throw the coat on. When you stand there And like all of a sudden you're staring at that dog, like it's a different feeling. Like Jess said, she got a little bit overwhelmed by just the rush of kind of emotion of like, like that dog's coming at her. And it's just a split second because the dog was close to her, but like, holy shit, like, and you can only imagine if that dog was clamped onto your bicep, and all you have to do is stick your thumb, up under your bicep and squeeze in there in that nerve bundle. I mean, some of those dog handlers I've listened to have talked about the nerve bundle that's in there, and it's basically completely incapacitating. Like you think,
oh yeah,
you're going to sit there and punch a dog as he's 65, 70 pounds swinging around on your arm. You're going down.
Yeah. I don't think that there's going to be anybody that's going to remain fighting the animal.
Yeah. Yeah.
It might even sober you up a little bit.
Yeah, 100%. So let's jump back a little bit here. I appreciate you covering that because I think there's just a lot with that we don't know. And actually, I do have one more question when it comes to these dogs. Like with Hans, with a dog that's say 3 or 4 years old, well trained. How trustworthy? How do you feel about those dogs around? Little kids. Little kids come to your house they don't know.
Sure.
2 years old, 3 years old, kind of right up in their face. And I'm guessing what you're going to say is you want to make sure also to put those dogs in a position to not maybe be in that spot. But like, how trustworthy are Malinois and Shepherds that are trained to do this, but then also have to live in daily society?
Yeah, I mean, I think if the training is done well and you've got the control that you should have, if you're also training the protection stuff and those competencies, you should feel more comfortable around your dog and, around a small child or just any person that might come to your house than you would with an untrained dog.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel that way. And I feel that way about all the dogs that we train with. And there are some dogs that are more serious, in which case we just don't put them in situations to fail.
Right.
But my two, and, my younger one is even more intense. He's kind of off the charts in drive, and he was not put on this earth to be a pet, but he is, and he's a really sweet dog, but just also happens to excel in protection work. But I've got young nieces and nephews that'll walk right up to him and he just calmly licks their face. So,
really.
So he's a kind, gentle being that's got a really severe on-off switch.
Yeah.
But at home, they're, like I said, they're just pets. They spend about 70% of their lives laying on the couch on top of my wife, like literally.
Yeah.
We always joke that they work for me and she belongs to them.
Yeah.
But it's pretty funny. But, yeah, I think if the training's done well, you should be more comfortable with them around situations, generally speaking. And it comes back to the neutrality, the indifference, kind of that harmonious state where you're working to allow them to be comfortable in any situation that they're in. Mm-hmm. When they're calm and comfortable, they're thinking clearly, and at the end of the day, they're dogs. They like people.
Right. Yeah, it's like my old lab I had when I trained her in high school. She got to the point where, she was just old lab that would lay around just as calm as can be, like prototypical lab. If I just pulled my shotgun out of the gun case, she would lose her mind.
That's the cue.
Right.
Yeah.
And like,
she's ready to go.
Yeah, just amped up to the max degree. And I can see where your dogs understand when there's like time to work time, and then there's, at the house just hanging out time.
Yeah,
for
definitely.
Sure. When they're in the kennels yesterday and they're getting ready to come out, like they know it's time to go to work, and they're pretty excited about it.
They're hot. They're anticipating some things there.
Yeah, for sure. Have you ever thought of, like, when you get to the point with your military career that you retire, would you ever train dogs and sell them? Is that a business or something you'd ever want to do?
Yeah, it's something we've definitely talked about. We started the LLC a few months ago, is just trying to get more legitimate with the thing that we do and pairing this with insurance and stuff like that to become more legitimate and professional. And I've got about 11 years to go in my military career, and we'll kind of see what happens between now and then. I always say a lot can change in a year, let alone 11. But,
right.
If year 11 was starting tomorrow, I'd probably be really working towards some sort of a model like that where,
Mhm.
you know, whether we're just going to take on students and handlers and train them and their dogs, or if we're going to train up dogs to sell, or, you know, some capacity there. But we're kind of seeing how things are going to take shape, and where we might need to go, or what the demand for our services might be. And
That's the one thing, though, I did too. I wanted to point out is that's impressive with you guys is how consistent you guys are with your training. I mean, you live over in Helena, so that's a 2-hour drive away. The fact that you drive over here every single Sunday and train dogs, and I think that's really something that we need to point out. Like, if you're gonna have these dogs, much like having a pistol and having training, like, it's a responsibility. You said something to me early on when I met you that basically if someone wants to be in your club or do this, they have to commit to really be in there and not missing trainings.
Yeah, definitely. And we have folks that drive from, the Coeur d'Alene area, folks that drive from Kalispell. And so, these are very dedicated individuals. And because of everything we talked about, you know, they just have to be that way. And we vet them very thoroughly on the front side to make sure that, you know, that everything about them kind of meets the requirement that before we teach them how to train a dog in this capacity, they've got the ability to do it. And more than anything, they've got the character and the drive to stick with it. Because, you know, if you get on the wrong path, you're all of a sudden you're putting bad training on the animal. You can create a bad situation.
Yeah, and even if you have the character and all the desire and everything in the world, like I would be a terrible dog owner with this, just with as much as I travel with my business. Like, your life has to kind of align for it. I mean, you guys have adjusted your lives around what your hobby is.
It does. You know, most of what we do is predicated on these animals. And, you know, for example, in a couple weeks, Kristen and I are going to go down and watch a hockey game in Vegas. Well, I can't just take my dogs to the normal kennel and board them like I would with pet dogs that I had in the past. I've got to take them over to Chris and his team at Run Your Pack, and, you know, they're the folks that I can trust to take care of them and, you know, be in a safe situation because of their ability and skill. And
you're not farming out a poodle.
Yeah.
Yeah, farming out a wild beast.
Yeah.
No, it's cool. What I also found really amazing yesterday was you guys almost always had, at least when I watched there, you, in the beginning especially, you had at least 2 dogs out, sometimes 3, and each handler was doing their stuff with their own dog. And each individual dog not one time looked over at what the other dog and that handler was doing. They were so in tune with the person that was handling them that dog could care less that there was another dog out, where, you know, you get most dogs out and you're at the park, they're going to want to run over and see what Rufus is doing over there.
Sure.
Which was very impressive to me, that those distractions of and the commands and everything happening, none of your dogs cared about what else was happening. It was just all about the handler.
Yeah, definitely. It's something we train in and we teach folks to train. So, you know, it kind of builds on itself. That way they can go somewhere, you know, they go to Home Depot, or they can go to the park where there's other stuff going on. And they're using that as a tool to train indifference, neutrality, because they're going to have to do it on the trial field.
Yeah.
You know, people just, bystanders that are at the park walking by with their animals, they don't realize that they're being utilized as a training tool.
Yeah.
they're helping us out.
Yeah. So let's get a little bit to kind of your background, your history. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Great Falls. Lived there till I was graduated high school, 18. Moved over here to Missoula. Excuse me. Started going to school here at the University of Montana. Was going to school for about a year or so, and then was kind of looking at the cost of the next semester and the next semester and thinking, I don't know if I can afford this. So I kind of debated a couple of things. You know, I go into the trades, and kind of at the time I was doing all kinds of stuff, pouring concrete or framing or landscaping, you know, any sort of manual labor position that they hired me to do. And I thought about doing a little bit of that. Luckily I had some parents that encouraged me to stay in school and maybe get in the military to help me pay for school. And
yeah,
it was one of the best things that I'd ever done.
Were you a good student in high school?
I was a much better student in high school than I was my first year in college, you know, and that always,
that's pretty typical.
Right. Yeah. It's funny how that works out. But I think it was because I wasn't necessarily challenged in high school. It was easy to kind of float by and still get pretty decent grades and not really work all that hard. Whereas college was, you had to apply yourself to earn the grade.
Were you an athlete in high school?
I was. Yep. I played football primarily, and baseball, I guess, were kind of my two main sports. And I wrestled and did some other things for a while, and then I really got into powerlifting, and so I kind of left all those kind of ancillary sports behind because I really got focused on being able to spend 2 hours a day in the gym picking up heavy things.
Yeah.
So,
you graduated what year?
2007.
7. Okay. So you got into powerlifting?
I did. Yep. Kind of right around my freshman, sophomore year of high school, got into that and thought it was a nice compliment to football. Thought maybe I'd be able to go play college football somewhere. Everybody wanted to come play for the Grizz or the Cats, and
right.
Didn't quite work out that way, which is fine. But
when you went to college, what did you start off in studying?
I think I started out with,
besides drinking beer.
Yeah, that I was pretty okay at that. That could have been one of the distractions. It's hard to quite tell, but
I doubt it.
I wouldn't think so. No, it
doesn't make any sense.
No, I don't think so. But I think I started out in business.
Okay.
And stuck with that for a little while and kind of threw some generals. Figured out that wasn't quite where my interests were, but that's always a good place to start, and thought it was broad enough. And it was nice because when I enlisted in the military, I was able to reflect a lot on that and think about what I wanted to do and mature a lot as well. Came back, realized that I really liked history and political science, things that really have direct career paths once you graduate.
Right.
But that was what I enjoyed, and I got into that, and that really kind of changed the trajectory of college for me. Ended up being very successful in school because I was enjoying what I was studying.
Well, I think I say that all the time. I think that's the biggest thing. I think especially I'm sure it's for girls too, but boys that want to be active and want to be out doing stuff. Like, I don't think boys were ever really cut out at 10 years old supposed to sit there for 7 or 8 hours a day and listen to a lecture in school. Right. And I find so many people, I was a C student, which was basically, I just did enough to keep my parents off my ass. They were still on my ass, but like to a tolerable amount, basically.
Yeah.
But I was into other things, working with my dad, into my knife stuff. And it really all excuses. Like, I just wasn't interested. But I think when people find something that interests them, and I think that's a super common thing where they go from being a C student in high school to straight A, top of your class in college, just because all of a sudden something motivated them.
Right.
That like, this is what you want to do. And which is another reason why, they used to say when I graduated high school, like, don't take a year off. You'll never go back. Like, don't, just go straight to college. And there's probably some truth to that.
Sure.
But that being said, like, you also see a lot of people go back to college at 26, 27 years old that went and got their ass kicked in the trades or did some roofing for 3 or 4 years and some sheetrocking. And all of a sudden they're like, okay, well, this is going to suck for 30 years. And maybe along the way they found an interest in business or accounting or, doctor, lawyer, whatever, and go back with a completely renewed passion and also an understanding of like, if I don't do well with this, I'm going to be back to hanging sheetrock. Yeah. Not that there's anything wrong with being a sheetrocker, but it's hard ass work.
It is. Yeah. And that was kind of it for me too. It was kind of a transformation in a lot of different ways, right? Needing to get your shit together, growing up a little bit, maturing, but then also, I was doing a lot of those jobs that were very hard on you. Mm-hmm. And so, I just kind of looked at it and was like, well, maybe I'll try using my mind instead of my back.
Yeah. So what made you choose the Army?
My dad was career Air National Guard. Okay. And he was a full-time employee federal technician for, I think 38 years is what he ended up with. So I started there because that's what I knew. Okay. And that's what he did. Go to the recruiters, and supply and demand was just, they didn't need anybody. They were sitting really good with their numbers.
What year was this?
This was in 2008. 2008, 2009, 2008, I guess, kind of when I started, the process to get into the military.
And that was the Air Guard that
Yep.
was kind of full at that time?
Yep, they were just sitting really good with their numbers, and so the dates available to get to initial entry training were really far out, like if I remember correctly, something like 8 to 12 months out, and then the jobs they had available were very limited.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I kind of kicked it around and thought, well, I'd kind of like to get in now, so I can get through training and get back to school and kind of keep everything moving forward that way. So, a lot of deliberation. Ended up going to the Army Guard recruiters, talking to them. Well, they've got 2 pages of jobs to pick from, and I just figured, well, I should be an infantry guy. That's what you do in the Army, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm sitting there, and I not luckily, but I had a recruiter that was like, "You can do anything on this page. Why do you want to be infantry?" I was like, "Well, isn't that what we do? That's the thing, And I thought, that would be an avenue to go deploy and do all that as well. But he was a Blackhawk mechanic, and so he talked me into selecting that job.
And this is for the Army Guard?
For the Army Guard. And
you didn't call your dad and be like, "Hey, what do you think?"
I think he was just happy enough that I was making the decision to take this plunge. So I think he was probably trying to let me make some decisions and, kind of invent my own path after that.
Yeah.
But,
so
I'd never even considered that was a possibility. So you can't be serious. You're going to trust me to work on a helicopter? No way.
And I remember being younger and those conversations of like, "Oh, I'm going to go be a helicopter mechanic." And it's like, well, I can't put my CD player in my car. Like,
yeah.
What?
Yeah.
How am I going to work on a multi-million-dollar aircraft?
I know. And I would help my dad with small vehicle projects. And I feel like I was much more mechanically inclined as like a young child than in my early adulthood. For some reason, that interest kind of faded a little bit. But I was like, well, that sounds really cool. And he's like, well, and you can grow into being a crew chief. And, those are the guys that sit in the window with the gun. And I'm like, okay, well, that all sounds great. And got me signed up. And I shipped out to basic training in 2009, I think. So it was a little bit of a process, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Flash to bang on getting enlisted and out and doing it.
Yeah. What was training like? Was it difficult? Did you find it pretty easy?
There were some parts of it that I really enjoyed, and there were some parts of it that I thought were kind of silly. But not understanding the why behind a lot of it, and the breaking down to build up, and the adversity that they were making you face, as a team and as an individual to grow. And so at the time I didn't appreciate a lot of that stuff that now I can look back and see how valuable it was. But, I think a lot of, athletes and kids that grow up playing team sports, you graduate high school, you're no longer really involved in anything like that, formally anyway. And so the camaraderie and, you're on an instant team. And so,
right.
So that was awesome. And you do some fun stuff, the obstacle courses, all those things are really fun. And you do have to work as a team. And for the most part, everybody's just like you. And they're all really good people. I mean, that's kind of the one thing that's kept me in the military now for almost 15 years is the people.
Yeah.
You just enjoy everybody that you meet for the most part. So
explain to people who don't understand, like, the difference between the Army Guard, the Air Guard, the time commitments, because there's some people in the Air Guard or the Army Guard that are full-time versus, like, I think we all know some people that do one weekend a month.
Yep.
What explain the differences with that.
So, the Army and the Air side, they function a little bit differently, which is requirements driven. So the traditional air guardsman is 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year, and they've got to fulfill that commitment, and they've got deployments and everything as well in schools that they have to attend. A good friend of mine just transferred into the Air Guard recently. It seems like they're maybe a little bit more focused on the individual training tasks, not so much as the collective as the Army is. So he's got a lot of flexibility with his schedule to go and attend his training and meet his requirements. Versus the Army, as me as a company commander, I need as many people at our training periods as possible so that we can meet collective training tasks and all be there together and function as a team. And so that's one difference I've noticed. And, I'm not in the Air Guard, so I can't speak to much more detail than that. But, as a traditional Army Guardsman in aviation, our commitments are a little bit heavier because we've got those aviation requirements, those flying requirements, and staying proficient in those tasks.
Mm-hmm.
So as just one of my lower enlisted mechanics, they've got the same requirement. They've got to come to guard drill training the 1 weekend a month for the most part, or our model's a little bit different where we meet 8 months out of the year just for longer periods of time. Then we've got our 2-week training that we have traditionally done in June, looking at different times of the year moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. And then the flyers have additional responsibilities. So they've got to come in at least a few times a month to meet their flight time requirements, whether you're a pilot or a crew chief. You've got additional commitment there. So we're seeing those people quite a bit more throughout the month.
So how does an Army Guard, like when you got through training,
mm-hmm.
do you spend a year or two full time in the Guard getting all your training, your Blackhawk mechanic stuff, or if because they bring most of the pilots through that program, right? You don't
Right.
just go to training and then go straight to flight school. Is that correct?
Correct. So yeah, my journey was, I didn't even know flight school was an option. So I got through my initial entry training, came back, sat in the aviation maintenance company for a couple of years.
Every day, full time?
No, so just the traditional 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year, but then they have additional flight training periods is what they call them. So you get 48 of those periods that you can kind of use when it works with your schedule or when the maintenance demand exists to come in and help out the full-time staff in keeping up with helicopter maintenance. And then oftentimes we have additional money. Our budget normally allows us to bring in additional mechanics for major maintenance projects. So if we've got people that are willing and interested in coming in and spending more time turning wrenches on helicopters, we can put them on a set of orders for 30 days or 60 days or, whatever the budget's allowing for, which is a great experience for them because it just helps them become so much more proficient. And then they get to work alongside our full-time mechanics, which are, exceptionally proficient at what they do.
Yeah, it'd be difficult because it's one of those use it or lose it things. I would think if you're not sitting there doing the thing and kind of keeping up on it, it would be easy to get, kind of rusty.
Very perishable skill.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a challenge, when our folks come in for any amount of time, if I'm in charge of whatever activities they're doing, I'm doing my best to facilitate to the furthest extent possible them turning wrenches on helicopters, doing their job training. It's what they come to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
They don't come to do administrative tasks, and granted, we have to do those as well, but we want to get them out working on helicopters. It's where they're going to be the most happy. We're getting a lot of bang for our buck because helicopter maintenance is the gift that just keeps on giving. There's never any shortage of it, and so everybody wins that way.
So when you went into the helicopter maintenance program, and you started doing your 1 weekend a month plus some of your other trainings. Were you also going to college at that time?
I was, yep. So still working through college. And then I had about 18 months to 2 years left in my college program. And then I elected to attend officer candidate school. So I went through the OCS program. A traditional program within the Guard is you perform most of it on the drill weekends, and then over a couple of 2-week periods to check all the blocks that you need to complete officer candidate school. About halfway through officer candidate school, I put in my flight packet and got picked up to go to flight school. And kind of if you'd asked me 2 years prior to that, if that option was even on the table, I would not have.
So how long were you doing mechanicing before you got to go to flight school?
Just a couple years, really.
Okay.
Not as long as I would have liked to.
Mm-hmm.
Just because that time is so valuable, and I see a lot of guys that spend a little bit more time kind of incubating in the aviation maintenance companies, and the lessons and the technical skills that they gain from that are invaluable. It helps them out in every other aspect of their career, but it worked out just fine.
It's similar. When I went through all my lineman training, you get hired as a groundman, which is just a total grunt. Nothing's really expected other than just keep your mouth shut and shovel, clean the trucks, right? But everybody wants to be an apprentice, right?
Sure.
And you want to become a lineman, a journeyman.
Yeah.
So everybody's always rushing through that period of like, well, can I just apply for apprenticeship, skip the groundman thing? And what you realize,
you don't want to. Take the time.
3.5, 4 years, 5 years later, when you turn out as a journeyman, you look back and you realize, like, it was really nice when you were able to just work and have nothing expected of you and learn the tools and watch the guys up in the air doing what they're doing. You sit on the ground and you bullshit with your foreman and he explains why they're doing what they're doing, right, and this and that. But there's no pressure on you, to do anything.
A lot of informal mentorship going on.
Yeah. And then, you get your apprenticeship, and then all of a sudden, real quickly, now things are expected of you. You're supposed to have a certain amount of ability, or if you don't have it, then you need to get it. And you're constantly testing, and you're moving on, and every step is more and more pressure, up to where you're a journeyman, and they turn you out, and here's a truck, and like, hey, there's power out over in that subdivision, like, go figure it out.
Yeah. It's all of a sudden this learning
holy
curve
shit.
is there. Hey, I'm the guy. Holy cow. Yeah.
Right. And like, well, can I take one of them old guys with me?
Yeah.
And you realize that time spent back doing the job that you didn't really want to be doing was actually super invaluable.
There's never quite enough of it because you're never going to be able to prepare for everything. But we do the same thing when we're training co-pilots into pilots in command. It's, you get them to the point where it's like, well, they're going to be safe to go out, and, they just need to be challenged now. The next step in the learning curve is the fact that they're going to be the ones in the helicopter that have to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a fun transition to watch.
How was flight school for you?
It was challenging. It was
Is it challenging more in the bookwork side or in the actual, like, learning to fly side? Like, I imagine the bookwork side would be really challenging.
Yeah, and maybe that even a little bit more so, but then, it takes you a while to physically figure out how to fly the helicopter. They say hovering, don't quote me on this, but something in the neighborhood of 12 flight hours is what it takes you to learn how to hover, I think, on average. I was a little bit quicker than that, I think, because I'd spent a lot of time in heavy machinery, kind of the same mechanics. And so some things like that came easy for me. And you're paired up with a stick buddy, and I had an exceptional one who ended up becoming one of my best friends. And, it's a cool relationship, but, he was much more talented with the book work, and I leaned on him a lot to help me get through that. And, we were a good complement because then I could, kind of help share some technique and feeling, and, maybe brought his hovering along a little bit quicker.
Does he remind you often that you were a dummy?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
It ended up going without saying. He could just give me the look and I know.
Yeah.
I know. But yet, both aspects were challenging. And then just the schedule is very rigorous. Really early mornings, you're waking up, sometimes right around 4 a.m. to get to the bus that takes you out to the flight line so that you can kick off your flight line training at, 6 a.m. And then it's a full day where you've got to sit down and go through all of your academics with the flight lead and then your individual flight instructor, and making sure that you had prepared for everything that you were supposed to know for that day. And then you go out and fly, each you and your partner do an hour and a half in the aircraft. And then you've got a quick lunch. You might be lucky to have 30 minutes for lunch or something like that before you're sitting in a classroom going through academics for, sometimes 4 hours into the afternoon. So you go home, grab a quick bite, maybe take a breather to kind of reset your mind from getting fried all day long.
Yeah.
But then you got to jump right back into the books because there's a lot of information that you need to know.
A lot of self-studying.
Absolutely. So you're just pretty rigorously tested every day.
Yeah.
On what you're supposed to know, and you can't ever forget the thing that you had to learn 2 days ago. And
yeah.
So helicopter limits and emergency procedures are what they refer to as non-negotiable things. It's chapters 5 and 9 in the -10 operator's manual, and you have to know those verbatim.
Really?
Word for word. So, and rightfully so, they're very important things. And so it was things like that challenged you. And so, Monday through Friday was a grind. I felt that it was much more challenging than my college experience. I think probably just because of how much they're packing into a short amount of time.
What's the length of the course?
It's about 14 to 18 months, depending on your airframe. I think I was a little closer to 14 to 15 months.
So when you were doing your mechanic stuff, you were still kind of the 1 weekend a month plus some training. Mm-hmm. When you went to flight school, are you like, okay, you're now full-time military, you're pulling a salary and this is your job?
Yep. Your active duty, your PCS, down to it's now Fort Novacell, Alabama, previously Fort Rucker, the home of Army Aviation. And you're there, and that's your job Monday through Friday is to learn how to fly a helicopter and be tested on it. And
man, 14, 18 months. I would imagine a few weeks into this, you're looking at it going like, this is an elephant. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to eat.
Oh, it's like a marathon that you're sprinting.
Yeah.
But great experience. Again, great people. Monday through Friday was you're just in it to win it. You just were committing to long hours and a lot of study time, and then and they'd even tell you that the instructors say, hey, you got to turn it off Friday. You got to reset your mind. Take Friday night, Saturday, dial it back in on Sunday, hit the ground studying, and show up prepared again on Monday.
How many guys are in school with you at this point?
Well, let's see. I believe our class was somewhere in the neighborhood of like 25 in a class, something like 26. Normally an even split because there's pairs of 2 with every instructor.
Okay. What's the like the pass fail rate generally, typically?
Pretty high pass rate.
Is it?
I think in our class we only had maybe 1 or 2 people fail. And I think that is just because of the vetting process on the front side and the aptitude that you have to show in the selection process you go through up front. So pretty rare that you would see somebody fail. Oftentimes what would get people, aside from not being successful in the academic setting or in the helicopter, was not maintaining physical fitness standards.
Oh, really?
And that was something that seemed to be a little bit more prevalent, pretty rare still, but you'd have to take physical fitness tests throughout the course of the 18 months. And if you didn't pass one, you had an opportunity to retake it, get your fitness under control.
Yeah.
But if you failed it again, you might not.
Well, I could see
stick around.
I could see with doing so much book work, so much, frankly, sitting around studying.
Yeah. It's easy to let it go.
Yeah. And a lot of what you're even doing during the day, though it's stressful, standing around either listening, watching, sitting in there flying a helicopter. I mean, you're not necessarily rocking all over the place. So I could see, and finding time, prioritizing fitness versus opening your books and studying be a challenge. Just choosing your time.
It was an easy thing to let fall by the wayside if you weren't focused on it for sure.
Seems like maybe there was a step in here, as far as what I understand, that was skipped. Like you were mechanicking, and what I thought the path generally was like mechanic to like chief engineer to pilot. Or
sure.
Is there was there, and maybe I'm jumping ahead, was there a time you went to like a chief engineer before you became a pilot?
So ideally, and we see this a lot with our warrant officer pilots, where a pretty common track for them is to go from lower enlisted mechanic to more of a senior level mechanic and or flying with the line companies as a crew chief.
Okay.
As a little bit more of a subject matter expert, get some knowledge, build your resume, and then
because a crew chief's on the bird.
They are.
And what's a crew chief's responsibility on the helicopter?
Crew chiefs have a lot of responsibility, and it depends on what you're flying with, but they've got a big one because they're going to be responsible for maintenance. They're responsible for everything that's going on in the back of that helicopter, whether it's preparation or getting packs on and off and so on and so forth. They're also sitting behind a gun overseas, so that big responsibility in of itself. But they're working very hard, more so than anybody else, because they're out early in the morning getting the aircraft through its daily inspection, preparing the cabin, whatever it might be. And then they're there long after the crew finishes the mission because now they've got another inspection to do, or they've got other ancillary tasks that need to be performed to keep this helicopter ready to go for the next thing. In the medevac world, we cross-train our crew chiefs so that they can be a second set of hands for that flight paramedic in the back of that helicopter should they need a hand running an IV or, passing along supplies or bagging a patient, whatever it might be. So, we always joke that, we sit up front, we're just the bus drivers, the professionals sitting back. But
Right.
there's some absolute truth to that when you look at the crew chief profession and those flight paramedics and what they do.
Sure. So when you got through flight school, what's the step after that then?
So I came home and I was a second lieutenant, so I got put into a section leader's role within the medevac company, working for a captain as the platoon leader. And I came back into a good situation because I was able to work through my readiness level progression in the year that I got back. It's got to spend a lot of time flying because we deployed almost a year later to the day after I got back. So then,
when you get through flight school and you come back, are you pretty much free to be a pilot right at that point and be the main pilot on a helicopter, or do you still have
you got a license to learn? You kind of know enough to be dangerous. You're going to spend quite a bit of time with an instructor pilot after you get home, because what flight school does is prepare you to just be a basic pilot, so you can come out and you can fly the helicopter from point A to point B. You can do some navigating. You might be able to talk on the radios, things like that. But when you come home, now we've got to teach you how to become a mission pilot, whether you're going to be a medevac pilot or an air assault pilot or a heavy lift pilot. Now we've got to teach you all those skills, and we've got to teach you how to fly in combat situations and all of those other things to be an effective combat crew member.
Is that kind of needs of the Army, like when you come home, as far as like what they push you into, medevac or heavy lift, or is that kind of like, hey, Bill over here is getting ready to retire or move on, or we're short on guys over here, or is that pretty much?
Absolutely. When we select somebody to go to flight school, we might not know in that moment what they're going to fly, but shortly thereafter, we're just kind of projecting those needs and we place them. So for the most part, our guys know what airframe they're going to fly and generally which company they're going to be a part of when they come back. Sometimes it changes as the situation changes at home. But for the most part, they know. Our Blackhawk guys probably have a little bit of a question mark. Are they going to be a medevac guy? Or are they going to be a CAT guy? They don't quite know. Probably closer till the end.
You said the Blackhawk guys are way cooler than the Chinook guys. Is that right?
I think generally speaking, there are some Chinook guys that are okay.
Yeah.
But and what's weird is they think the opposite. I don't get it.
That is weird.
And the Apache guys think that they're the coolest. And both the Blackhawk and the Chinook guys can agree that the Apache guys are not. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it seems obvious to me. I mean, as a guy who grew up running an excavator and a backhoe, I feel like I can pretty much fly them all, because you just said it earlier in the podcast.
Definitely.
Like,
and
I mean, I ran a lot of heavy equipment, which a lot of times I imagined being a helicopter pilot as I was spinning around in the excavator.
Did you make the noises?
I can hover so good, like when I just spin around back and forth, I never lose or gain altitude.
Yeah. No,
on my excavator, I just spin.
As soon as I told the instructors down at Fort Novacell that I had run some heavy equipment, they pretty much just signed me off, ready to go.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
Yeah.
So with that being said, do you went down to fly Blackhawks, right?
Yep.
Do they cross train you with a Chinook or an Apache or something else?
Generally speaking, the airframe you're given at the get go is what you're going to fly for the remainder of your career. There are some of us that are unique, and I'm one of them, where I've been fortunate enough to get trained in the Lakota, so I spent some years flying the Lakota as well. And now...
What's the Lakota?
It's the smaller helicopter. It replaced the Kiowa back in around 2014. Light utility helicopter, LUH-72. Pretty nice little helicopter. We use it here in the state for counter drug. We use it for search and rescue. It's got a sensor package on it. Nice helicopter built by Airbus. So our Lakota unit just came back from the southwest border, actually. And while they've been gone, I took on roles in Flying Bolt. We've got 2 models of Blackhawk currently in the state. The Lima model, a little bit older model that our CAC unit flies, and then the Mike model, which is the newest model of Blackhawk that our medevac flies. So I'm now flying both models of Blackhawk, and I'll probably leave the Lakota behind and let somebody else pick up that torch. And
so I found it really interesting. We were very fortunate to have you invite us over, kind of take a tour and everything over there in Helena last winter. And it was amazing to me how you kind of showed how those helicopters can be really set up completely, differently depending on what's going to be being used for. And, for example, like basically turn them into an air ambulance medevac. It was amazing the amount of, what do you call it? Litters or the beds?
Yep, the litters.
Yeah. And, how many guys you can potentially haul in there if you had to, how set up they are. I mean, they're a little traveling hospital. It's pretty amazing. But then how those things, can convert to basically being a bus, an Airbus, and just haul people around the battle space, or putting guns on them and turning them into an assault helicopter. It's pretty impressive how
a lot of utility, a lot of different applications, and it changes from one tour to the next, from one unit to the next, how they need to set themselves up to be successful. And I don't remember if we had one. The way we flew overseas was we gutted all that stuff out because we wanted more open space, and we wanted to be a little bit lighter, fly faster.
What was that first deployment like? What year was that?
2016, I believe.
Okay.
I'm bad with dates, but
like when I turned out as a journeyman lineman, I kind of alluded to that. Like it's weird when they give you a truck and they're like, okay, you're on nights this week and you're on weekends and you're by yourself, and you're a little different where you have a team, but like you're by yourself. It's kind of all on you. You got to figure it out. Though you have a team, like you're the pilot, and now you're going overseas, like you're going to a war zone.
Yep.
What is that feeling like going over there? Are you feeling really confident, nervous, all of it?
Yeah, kind of a mix of everything. A lot of unknowns. It was going to be my first experience at that, and I had a lot of responsibility, especially after I figured out where I was going and who I was taking, and I was going to be the most senior ranking guy for the medevac crew at that location. But they gave me a great supporting staff, and I had some just outstanding warrant officers and NCOs that were great in assisting me and the team in being successful. And so just a ton of mentorship. And we were able to be very successful. But yeah, I remember finding out, that we didn't know until we were about ready to jump on the plane to head over where we were going to be assigned in theater.
Where was it?
I ended up at a place called Tower 22 in Jordan.
Okay.
And it's right on the border of Syria, and we flew all of our missions in support of special operations up into Syria. But it was just kind of an interesting, first week and a half of the tour, from finding out, days or a week later, hey, this is where you're going, this is the team you're taking, and you're in charge, kind of thing.
Yeah.
To kind of working through that and processing that and thinking through all the stuff we need to do to be successful and what's on my plate, to landing in Kuwait, jumping on a C-130 pretty much immediately, flying to somewhere where I didn't know where we landed.
Yeah.
And we got off the C-130, and there's a team there to load us up in some trucks, and we throw all our bags back in there. And I'm sitting next to this gal who's driving us over to where we're going to stay, I assume. And she's, how are you guys doing? How was the flight? Everyone doing all right? You need anything? I'm like, yeah, where are we? Where would you say we're at here? And I'm supposed to go to this place called Tower 22. Where's that? And she goes, oh, this is, Prince whatever Air Base, and you guys will take off tomorrow morning, and you'll drive to Tower 22. I said, drive? Okay, interesting. Where's it at? And she's like, well, it's like 8 hours that way, just points in a
Across
direction.
the desert. Can we fly?
Yeah. There's no helicopters here. We're helicopter people. We're gonna need some of those. But yeah, interesting start. You know, we jumped in with some of the team guys the next morning and drove Toyota pickups up to where we were gonna be stationed to do our support role.
And you flew medevac for that deployment?
Yep, it was a medevac tour, and that drive up to Tower was 2 hours on a hardball roll going east, and then you just hang a left and you drive for about 4 or 5 hours across the desert. And
so if you go out on a mission, and can't give away too much in tactics wise, but I don't think this question will do that. If you've got a team going out to do an operation, are you guys kind of hanging and rattling on the kind of on the edge of that battle space, just basically hanging out, kind of waiting just in case? I would imagine you've got kind of like a quick reaction force that would help be there if you needed to. But like, what does that look like for you guys?
So we're always postured, ready to go. Any time during the day, within 15 minutes, we have to be off the ground should the 9 line come in. Normally we're much faster than that. It obviously there's healthy competition to be the quickest one off the ground.
Yeah.
But yeah, basically it's the golden hour. So the concept of that is the chance to save life, limb, or eyesight go up exponentially when you get somebody who's been injured to a higher level of care within an hour. And so generally it's 30 minutes out, 30 minutes back is the ring that we want to be within. Now it's an imperfect world, imperfect battle space. You do that to the best of your ability. But most of the time we're able to meet that requirement. And so.
Do you remember maybe a first experience or an experience that sticks out the most in your mind of potentially, flying in to do what you need to do and taking fire or having it kind of be heavy where you're like, holy shit, this is real?
Yeah. I mean, right out the gate there, we were put in that situation. A fob that we were supporting that was just north of us, where a lot of the operations were run out of, got hit, and big gunfight, lasted all night, a lot of things, bombs dropped. I mean, it was the full-fledged, it was like, okay, this is it, and you got to kind of see everything in that 8-hour period. And we launched, and once they were able to clear the LZ, and our very first call, what was considered a mass cow, we filled 2 helicopters worth of patients, and everybody lived, which is starting out with success right there. So we were thrilled with that. Injuries that were all recoverable, and that was really not too far in, maybe 3, 4, 5 days into the tour, we jumped in head first. So a lot of it was sink or swim. I was a very junior lieutenant, running basically a medevac platoon, which is normally a captain's job, somebody with a little bit more years behind him. I'd really just learned how to fly effectively.
I mean, you're 1 year out of school, which is crazy.
So I'm pretty green. But it was a very fortunate experience across the board because it challenged me to elevate myself and become a better pilot, become a better leader, obviously receive a lot of mentorship and be able to hear and apply that. Some of that too also comes with understanding what to take and leave, right? And what to filter.
Sure.
But it was an excellent challenge, and I feel fortunate that I had the opportunity to do it and go over there and support the ground troops and do my job, because I've got peers that have not had that opportunity.
Right.
And granted, you don't want to have to be utilized as medevac by any means, but being able to go out there, and we didn't lose anybody. Everybody we went out to get, that we answered the call and were able to bring them home. And
that's great. Have you deployed since then?
Nope,
That's your first one, first and only. Yeah.
Yep. The battalion has, but just timing with they parsed us out. We deployed on a different cycle. So a couple years after we got back, majority of the battalion went again, and so there's a lot of guys in the unit that have deployed 3, 4, 5 times. But it's a timing thing.
What I found really interesting when I was over there, and I didn't know this, one of the coolest things that you guys do is search and rescue locally.
Sure.
And, we pay our tax dollars and we tend to bitch about it. But one thing that makes me feel really good is when you realize your tax dollars are truly going back to helping the community. So often, especially, for the last 20 years, and especially even here as we sit here today, we see our tax dollars and a lot of this training and a lot of the stuff all going overseas, right? With how much we're operating overseas and different theaters and stuff going on over there. And there's a big debate that it's probably for a different podcast with someone who's not actively serving as to whether or not we should be doing that stuff. But that being said, a lot of people don't realize how much you guys support and actively participate in the search and rescue. And especially in a state like Montana, compared to some other states with our, terrain around here with all the hiking and all the different sports that you can do, skiing, snowboarding, all these different things that lead to potential emergency situations.
Yeah, definitely.
Talk a little bit about your guys' involvement in that and even what those people have to pay that do get rescued if you call in, as a lost person or injured in the woods and stuff like that.
Yeah, so it seems like we've become maybe increasingly used to a certain extent, and it's weird. It kind of comes in waves. There'll be weeks where we'll get called out to go rescue somebody on subsequent days, 3-4 days in a row, and then it'll be kind of quiet. And there's some other good assets out there, like Two Bear does a ton. I think they're very busy. A good asset, and those guys are very effective at what they do. Generally, when we're called, it's a situation where you need the Blackhawk, you need its power and capabilities, and the hoist, maybe the paramedic in the back, to go out and do it. So very technical, mountain flying.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we answer the call. Normally it has to be run through a sheriff's deputy, or it has to have to be run through a sheriff's deputy, and then Joint Personnel Recovery Center has to issue us a mission number, and the sheriff works with them down at Tyndall Air Force Base to.
Well, let's talk about that. So if I've got my inReach, and I'm in the mountains hunting, horseback, doing whatever, snowboarding, and I get in trouble and I hit my SOS on my inReach, what happens?
Joint Personnel Recovery Center, I believe, is informed of that, and it's pinged at probably a few different levels, but they're made aware. Then they notify.
Where are they at?
Down in Tyndall Air Force Base in Florida, I believe, is where they're at.
Okay, so I'm in Montana, and I hit that SOS, and that goes to Florida?
It does.
That's amazing.
And then they pick up the phone, and they start, getting a hold of people. I'm sure they've got a contact list. I've never dug into what their portion is from them to the sheriff's deputy or whoever they're calling, but then either we normally get notified informally, maybe from the search and rescue agency in the county or whoever's in the area, or the sheriff calls one of my bosses directly to kind of put us on notice. Hey, we've got a situation. Somebody hit the SOS button on the Garmin. Might need you guys to come help us out. And so normally we kind of just set things in motion. We get ready to go, and then we have to wait to launch until that mission number is published by Tyndall, and that's our authorization to go and provide assistance.
Okay.
So, for anybody that's listening, if you ever plan to get lost, carry the Garmin. That's our first, because we're way more successful with people that have some sort of device that's going to pinpoint their position versus people that we're going out and searching for.
Okay. So if I hit that, is Tyndall Air Force Base also getting coordinates sent to them from that?
I believe they do. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's always passed along to us, but I'm pretty sure the Garmin is providing that information.
Okay.
And normally we don't do a lot of interacting with Tyndall, JPRC. Normally all of our information comes from the sheriff, but it would make sense to me, stand to reason that Garmin is pushing all of that data in that moment.
Okay. And maybe you don't even know this because, you're just getting the mission to go. But, I wonder if I hit that button, generally, there's ability to communicate with those. So you'd have to be in a pretty bad way to not be able to communicate at all. And that's the advantage with those, is you can actually send a message along. I would imagine it's probably somewhat rare for someone to hit that button and have zero communication, unless it's an accidental push of that button, and I'm sure that happens. But I would just wonder, at what level does it get escalated to where they actually decide to push you guys out? If there's no communication whatsoever, I wonder if someone from the local sheriff goes up and they're like, oh, this guy's really in bad way, and now we need him.
Oftentimes, when it's kind of that delayed response, somebody's been gone for a couple of days, hasn't checked in. And again, it always, you just wish the report would go up sooner. There's always reasons, I'm sure, why it doesn't, but the longer we wait, time is everything. In medevac and in search and rescue. But it's normally a family member or somebody that was aware of, the hunter that went out and was supposed to check in every day, and it's been 2-3 days since they've heard from him. And there's been situations where they do have a Garmin, but it's been left in their camp, right? Or, in which case they can ping that device and we can get to it, but people don't always carry it with them. People are conserving battery, different things like that. It just becomes an exponential challenge at that point.
Yeah. Now, what do you guys have for capabilities on your aircraft to help find someone with, let's say I've not hit that button, I'm just lost, and you're trying to find somebody with, using the heat from their body or whatever.
So what we've done in recent years, and we've got 2 helicopters that do have FLIR cameras on them, or sensors that are, they are infrared capable. And a technique we've developed is launching both the medevac Blackhawk and the Lakota in its sensor capabilities to give us the best opportunity to find somebody. And it's just hoping to find somebody's body heat. The guys that sit in the back of those Lakotas are excellent at running that system and doing the search. So we kind of we have the Blackhawk flying low, using their camera and searching visually, hopefully in a confined search area, and we've got the Lakota flying high overhead, searching for that individual, hoping to find their signature.
Can you see a signature of where they've walked, or?
Sometimes it depends on the environment, right? Obviously, if the ground is really hot, it's a hot summer day, you don't have that contrast. Cooler days, that heat signature might stick around there for a little while. Especially if they're warm, the ground's cold, that's going to stand out much better than if the temperatures are close together.
So last week I told my team, I met with them all. I've got several new employees that aren't from here. They've moved here. They don't have family around, kind of basically starting their lives here. And I really encourage them all to shoot me a text and say, hey, I'm going to be going up 9 Mile hunting. I'm going to be going up Petty Creek hunting. Sure. I might be parking my truck at this gate. Yeah. At the very least, even if you said I'm going to go up Petty Creek, that's still a huge area.
Yeah.
Right. It would be much handier if, I'm going to go up Petty Creek and park on such road on the west side. But I told them, at the very least, if you guys will just shoot me a text, I don't care if it's 3 a.m. and you're driving out and you're like, shit, I didn't let anybody know. You just tell me where you're at. I'm going to be in Lincoln, or I'm going to be up in Seeley Lake, and what creek you're going to be up, or what road. I said, please do that with a note of I'm going to be back by 6 o'clock tonight. Or if I don't hear from you by 6, 8, 9, 10 o'clock, I can start getting pretty worried.
Yeah.
Depending on the weather conditions, may or may not call search and rescue until the next morning. If it's rifle season and it's 25 degrees out for a high and 8 for a low, by 9 o'clock at night, I'm
gonna get them out there.
We're getting people out there. I think to your point, if you guys have a search area, that's got to be probably the most important piece of information you have besides just actual coordinates.
Right. And even I've been on rescues before. I did one up in Holland Peak where the sheriff provided us the grid location, but it was kind of at a point where they could have been on either side of a peak, and we know there's a little bit of variance there, and we just couldn't see them. It took me forever just to get visual on the patient that needed to be rescued. just because it is so difficult. So even with a good search area, your odds of being found are going down if we don't have a coordinate. So that's where I say anybody that's going to go out and do some hunting, whether you think you're not going off the beaten path or you're going deep into the bob, pick up one of those devices that has an SOS feature. Make sure you understand it. Make sure you know how long that battery is going to last. And
how accurate is that coordinate? Like what size area is that showing you?
I don't know exactly, and it might vary a little bit depending on the device. But normally we get, an 8 or 10 digit, 80 digit grid traditionally if you're doing it MGRS, and then the same if we're doing lat long. So it's pretty exact.
Is that within a quarter mile, a half mile,
probably
500 feet?
10 to 25 meters. It's pretty.
Oh, it's pretty damn
close.
pinpoint.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Oh shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really accurate. So what does that, if I get lost or I bust my ankle up on Holland Peak or whatever, and you come long line me off of there, what's that cost me?
We have in the regulation, it can be incidental to training. That's always the best training we can possibly get. To the furthest extent possible, we're always going to, hey, that helicopter was going to fly that day. It was going to train. That money was already going to be spent. And then we just have to go through a process to approve that was going to be an incidental training event. And then there's no money billed. Now, that it's an approval process that has to be worked through. There is a reimbursement aspect that could happen. But
so it's no guarantee.
It's not a guarantee, right?
Yeah.
But I don't believe that we've had to charge anybody in recent memory. We've always been able to justify the use of that helicopter because of what it was already intended to do that day.
How large of an area are you covering for search and rescue?
We'll do the whole state, and then we've even helped out Wyoming at times when, they didn't have the ability to respond, or maybe we were closer.
So I mean, you're just because you're in Helena, that doesn't mean it's just the Bob Marshall or it's just a certain small area.
Right.
Like you're covering some pretty good ground.
Yeah, and it's a coordinated effort. If say the Idaho guys are going to be closer and more set up for success on that mission, over there in the Bitterroot,
Cabinet Mountains or something.
Who knows? Yeah. Maybe we'll defer to them to respond. But it's.
Do you then send an email and say we would have done it faster, but thanks for the help?
There's always got to be some sort of healthy competition there.
So what I've heard in this basically is take a Garmin, take an inReach, and then if you shoot an elk in a terrible spot, hit your SOS, and you guys will long line it out for free.
I think someone's going to have to get hurt. I don't, and
well, I'm willing to break my ankle sometimes if it means I don't have to carry that thing for okay, it's going to hurt. I'm going to bust my ankle here, but then Tommy will come get my elk out.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. Since we're speaking publicly and all that, the elk might have to stay unless the elk is hurt and needs to be rescued as well. But,
it is hurt. I mean, I've killed it.
So that goes into a whole nother mission, for
it's training for heavy load lifts. And,
yeah. Right.
Yeah. So no, don't do that. If you can't tell that we're joking, don't hit your inReach.
We can't recover animals or scout animals or anything.
Yeah.
But if you get hurt, make the call early and often because we might just be the asset that gets assigned to come help you out.
Well, that's the other piece of information too, is not being afraid to make that call for help. I mean, especially just frankly today we're hitting that time of year. We got really cold weather coming in. Rifle season has just kicked off. That you're definitely going to get heckled by your buddies if you get rescued by the Army Guard. But
if you live,
exactly.
And that's the thing. It might not be us. It might be Two Bear. There might be other assets.
It could just be the local sheriff's office,
right? Or be recovered on foot. But I think the mistake is always not calling early enough. Even if the mission does come to us and we launch and we fly halfway there, and then for whatever reason we're not needed, the person's recovered. Hey, no ill will. We were happy to launch, to have gone and done the thing. And I got to imagine that's the same for any emergency service. The goal is to get the person safely recovered. It's not who did it or how it was done.
Didn't you guys have, you yourself, if I remember correctly, got in a bind in the Bob Marshall with a horse that came off the trail, rolled off?
So, yeah, I wasn't there for that one. I was on the other end of the phone call. Actually, I was at home, but yeah, some of my good buddies that are crew chiefs and paramedics and pilots, they were hauling out of the Bob in the evening, going up an embankment. Horse slipped, ended up flipping over backwards. A friend of ours, pretty serious injury, broke his pelvis, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So in a bad way.
Ended up with a horse on top of him.
He did, yeah. And I think it was a speed goat that cut the saddle off of that horse to allow that horse to get up and not roll over. And from what I understand, if that horse would have rolled over, it could have been much, much worse.
I think they cut the cinch off the horse with and the straps and stuff off with a speed goat, which is wild. Yeah. But you got called to lift them out, didn't you?
So we didn't actually end up responding. It was a civilian medevac that responded and was able to get close enough, and they were able to get the patient to that asset. But they didn't think that when they were texting me with a Garmin inReach, they didn't think that helicopter was going to be able to get to where they were, but it worked out. So, we were kind of thinking it was going to be a situation where things might go through the channels and we would.
So you were kind of ready to go.
Sure. We were kind of had that informal notification, and it was just kind of funny because they were talking to this civilian asset helicopter and, basically giving an LZ briefing. And they're, who are you guys? We're medevac crew guys from the Army National Guard.
Yeah.
So, that's the other thing too. I guess if you're going to get hurt in the backcountry, take a critical care flight paramedic and a crew chief that can clear the LZ and bring in the help. That'll be helpful as well.
Yeah, for sure. That would be if we all had buddies like that.
Right.
Yeah. You've also one last thing is you've not just done things in the air, but you've even competed on some stuff on the ground. Kind of tell me, because I remember you and your buddy a couple times went down and competed in a pretty cool event down. Was it in the desert?
Yeah, down in the San Rafael Desert, southern Utah.
Yeah, tell me about that.
Yeah, that was probably one of the coolest things I've gotten to do in my military career. Was a 19th group used to host this event, and they were gracious enough to provide us an invitation. We got to send 4 teams total through the training event. Some of the best training you could ever imagine, but they also turn it into a competition. There's a best team at the end of it, and it's they call it Aviation Corridor 88 because 88 miles across the desert and all kinds of different situations you got to work through, whether it's paddling down the river in a canvas boat that you had to put together in the middle of the night, or a couple of rappels into these slot canyons, which might have been the highlight. Definitely was probably the highlight of that event. But
was that training that you had in the military? Was this rappelling or?
No, I'd never rappelled before in my life. Really sharp, capable master mountaineers from the SF community rigged us up and put us through a crash course and sent us down the rock face. And
so they had a couple guys sitting there making sure you guys weren't doing something real stupid.
They did, yeah. We would have found a different way to get down that mountain if it weren't for those boys there.
Yeah, fast one with a hard landing.
Right, yeah. That would have been less than ideal, I'd suppose. But,
yeah.
It was pretty cool. Got to do it with a good friend of mine who was one of my flight paramedics that I deployed with, and we just been through a lot together in our military careers. So that was kind of probably the highlight of our friendship, and we took it really seriously. We trained hard. We didn't want to show up and embarrass ourselves or our organization, and wanted to put on a good showing in front of these guys that we respected, and we're grateful for the opportunity to train alongside them. And we actually came out and won best team that year, and finished first in the competition. And
yeah, that's awesome. Now, did you bust your ankle on that one?
So my partner did the year before. He had gotten to compete in the event with another one of our pilots, and he'd busted an ankle. Gosh, I think actually during the rappel, which is somewhere. I mean, you still got a lot of the course left to go. You end up doing about 100 miles all told to finish that training event. And gosh, I bet he had 30, 40, 50 miles to go, and he just had to gut it out. And
he finished it on a broken ankle.
He did. Yeah.
What a savage.
He's a stud. I refer to him as the Sherpa. I was out there. I was in good enough shape to do the whole thing, but he was the one driving the train.
Yeah.
So yeah, he was a good guy to have out there.
And did you guys go and win it again?
So the following year, we sent down a different team, two different guys from our organization, and they won it the following year. So
did they do it faster than you?
Well, they say they did, but there's no way.
Yeah, that's pretty cool though that you guys. 88 miles across the desert. How long did that take?
I think we did it in like 44 to 46 hours. I can't remember the exact time. We had to do a couple of RONs. They don't want you going down the river, at dark. There's just some safety
What's
things.
an RON? Rest overnight?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was kind of built into the time. But yeah, we right around mid 40s is what it took us to do it.
And explain to us, like, when is it supposed to simulate kind of like a down helicopter type deal, or you end up basically in enemy territory and you got to get to an extraction point type deal?
It's kind of like a follow on. Yeah, it's an evasion. Right, you're evading the enemy. Right.
Okay.
Simulate that you guys are shot down, and now you've got to.
Do they just give you some coordinates that you or how do you know exactly where to go and how to get there?
So they're giving you coordinates. You got a map, and you've got to work through the course to get to your caches to replenish your stock. And they're kind of simulating, hey, you guys are on the run behind enemy lines, and you're getting resupplied to continue your evasion until you can get extracted.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay. And you had to put together your own boat? You
did, yeah.
How's that? What did that
It was
look
a
like?
challenge. It was a million pieces, with this aluminum frame canvas boat. There was some air bladders that ran along the side. One of our air bladders didn't work. The tube was, or the receiving end of the inflatable portion, it wasn't there.
Really?
And so, and the river's like dead. It's got no current. It's like standing water, and it's shallow, especially the time we were doing it. So you kind of had to pick your lane so you didn't get high centered on a sandbar or rock. And you were paddling the whole way. So,
really?
I just had to channel the inner Viking and row like I'd never rowed before. But it was like 28 river miles, so it was.
Damn.
You were doing some stuff.
That's pretty cool.
But yeah, that was probably one of the highlights of my military career, getting to be able to participate in that. Pretty fortunate.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Well, then you can tell those infantry guys that you might be up in that helicopter, but that you've done their job. It's pretty easy.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Yeah, there's definitely some healthy jokes that go along with that, because granted, we were fortunate to have the opportunity to be invited to go. But yeah, so far only aviation members have competed and won that event from the Montana Army National Guard.
That's pretty cool.
So yeah, we're not the guys that walk, but I guess we are in that instance.
So what are you doing now? You're still full time, right? You're not doing the 1 weekend a month thing. You're full time. What's your position now?
So I'm our operations officer at the flight facility there. So I supervise all of our flight instructors and our standardization instructors, and basically what we're tasked with is going through all the readiness level progression for our young pilots, coordinating, managing the evals and the day-to-day, so that the M-Day soldier is facilitated and coordinated for their flight time to come in and knock out those proficiency tasks that they need to do. In addition to that, I still help out with maintenance as much as I can. I think can't remember when you guys came over if I was doing the maintenance officer job or if they'd moved me on.
You just moved on.
Just moved on, but I miss maintenance. I enjoy it, and so I try and help those guys out as much as possible with test flight duties and things like that.
I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about this stuff, and I know you probably can't speak too much on it, but with what's happening in the world right now, we've had this Russia-Ukraine stuff going on for quite a while, and we're not technically involved over there, though we obviously have been involved to a certain degree. But now we've got this deal kicking off in Israel, and who knows what's going to happen.
Sure.
What goes through your mind when you're seeing that stuff, kind of just from a personal aspect, not from an official, Army perspective, but just like, it seems pretty goddamn real right now, and
Sure.
the potential for that turning into a major situation is definitely there, much more so than probably anything we've seen in a while.
Yeah.
What are your feelings there?
Well, you're just kind of sitting back and watching it like everybody else is. And, you're hoping whatever happens is going to be held at a conflict at the lowest level, between those two parties, and nobody else gets drug into it. And, you just don't know, right?
Yeah.
It's really hard to tell what could happen. And we don't know what the strategic lines of effort might be and what that could mean for us. I don't know. But
what have you seen in the last few years since kind of the Iraq-Afghanistan stuff has cooled off, the Russia stuff kind of heated up? We haven't had enough time, obviously, for things to change much because of Israel. It's just been 2 weeks now. But have you guys seen your training, things that you focus on and some of that stuff change with the Russia stuff going on versus like the way you were training before with like more of the desert stuff?
Sure. I mean, I think you're always preparing for the next thing to the best of our ability. Our job is to produce readiness and to be able to anticipate and meet the demands of the next conflict. And so, yeah, there's definitely different techniques and training and everything that's applied when you're talking about a large-scale combat operation versus an insurgency fight. And so we're constantly adapting and trying to make sure that we're ready to go for whatever the next thing could be. And hopefully it's just nothing.
Do you have, with being in the Guard, do you have certain areas of the military or certain units or groups that you would be more likely to support if they were activated versus like other ones? Like what do you tend to support? What part of the military with what you guys do?
It seems like towards the tail end of the Iraq, Afghanistan conflicts, it seemed like more smaller team stuff. We seem to be paired with kind of the special operations community as a medevac asset. Was largely our experience over there. And as far as what we could support next, it could be anything. Again, it's the demands, right? Where are we needed?
Right.
And then where do we fall in the pecking order? Where does our unit, what's our number in the line to go?
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of a timing.
Is that stuff they share with you guys, or do you even know? Not that you have to share it, but like, do you guys even kind of have an idea of it? Not
really. I mean, no. And yeah, that's not really stuff I see at my level. That'd be far above me to see. And I don't know, like if when it's decided, right? Because it probably changes depending on the conflict and the demand.
Right.
So
Sure. Well, I really appreciate you coming over. Is there anything else we missed? I mean, I'm sure you got all kinds of stories, but I don't know is there anything you want to add or that I missed?
I don't think so. I mean, we talked about probably the two things I know: helicopters and dogs. So yeah. Thanks for having me on it. I always really enjoy the opportunity to spend a little time with you and see the great operation that you've got going on here. And I'm always curious to see what you've got coming out next. So,
well, man,
fun.
I appreciate it. I appreciate the support and the friendship. Definitely got to come out and watch you do some more dog training. It would never, well, I shouldn't say never, but it definitely wouldn't be something I'd be able to get into now just because I see the level of commitment and what that is, but have a ton of respect, really a newfound respect for, I've always thought it was cool, but it was like kind of mysterious, what guys do with the dogs. And I've already enjoyed listening to those kind of podcasts and stuff, but to actually see it in action is really, really cool. And I actually saw one of the coolest things was coming back from Costa Rica a few years ago. We were in the Seattle airport, and we walked in, and the security lines were out of control. And I was just like, we're going to probably miss our flight, right? And so this lady says, hey, go down to the other end. That line's moving faster. Okay, so we walk, seemed like forever, down to the other end of the terminal. We get down to security, and it's worse. And I'm pissed. I'm like, We could have just stood in line down there, you know? And I mean, it was unbelievable the amount of people in that line. Well, as we're standing there, this line is moving fast, really fast. And I'm like, God dang, this is like impressive. And a TS agent walks by and they're basically yelling to this giant crowd of people, you know, leave your coats on, leave your shoes on, don't take things like, don't do this, don't do that. Like pretty much anything you know about TSA, forget it, like whatever, right? And so as we get up a little further, I was like, hey, what's the deal with this? Why are they doing this? And they're like, well, we have a dog. And so, you know, really so much of what happens in TSA is based around bomb stuff.
Right.
And they're like, because we have the dog, like our protocols are totally different and we can move people through a lot faster. And that dog was just wandering around. I don't think that dog ever got within 20 feet of me.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And I was talking to another guy that handles dogs, and he was like, yeah, he's like, if there was a bomb in that room, the minute somebody walked into that room that had bomb making materials or whatever
they'd know
on them, that dog would know as soon as you walked in the room. Like that dog it wouldn't take long.
Right.
And that dog would alert.
Well, I think with detection, I think the dogs are far more effective than any technology that we have.
Yeah, it was mind-blowing. And I was like, well, what I just learned here is we need a dog in every damn airport in America. Because, I mean, it was unbelievable how much more efficient it was. And, like you say, not only more efficient, but also probably, frankly, more accurate. Yeah.
The dog's not going to make the mistake the human might. You might miss something going through a scanner or whatever else. Dog's not going to miss it.
Yeah. And the guy that taught me to build knives was one of the first dog handlers that the military had back in the Air Force. I think it was in the 70s. And he was involved in training bomb dogs back then. And it was amazing hearing like what the tests those dogs had to do to pass to become a certified bomb dog. And I just think it's fascinating, honestly. So I appreciate you letting us check it out, and I appreciate your service to our country and what you guys do. And Jess and I, you guys were kind enough to take us up on a flight this summer out of Kalispell. She rode on the Chinook, so obviously she got the short end of the stick. I got to fly on the Blackhawk, and no, the crews. Unfortunately, you weren't there, but the crew on the Chinook, the crew on the Blackhawk, everybody involved were amazing professionals. It's wild to think that those guys that are doing that just do that on the weekends, like here and there, and they actually have jobs and businesses they're running around the state. And that's what I think a lot of people don't understand with the National Guard is like that dude that you see flying over the helicopter and landing at the airport, is a vet or freaking banker, has a framing business, like
a cop or something.
Yeah, just like you probably are standing next to one of those dudes at your kid's softball game and you don't even know. Which is just amazing to me because now they're balancing everything that we all balance in life with families and jobs and whatever. Oh, and by the way, they also have this whole other side that they have to worry about.
It's a challenge for us that we do it full time, and it's a challenge for us to meet all of our requirements. And so, you're absolutely right. The guy that does it part time, he's got an exponentially more difficult task. Mm-hmm. So, they're pretty incredible people.
Yeah.
We're lucky to have them. There's a lot of talent in that organization.
Yeah, and, we're lucky across all branches of the militaries, all levels, from supply chain all the way up to, a unit guy or a, high-level SEAL or whatever, and every pilot in between flying jets or helicopters. I mean,
it takes it all.
It takes it all, and
everybody's just as important as the next guy.
Yeah, and we can only pray that the you guys are the hammer, and hopefully the arm that swings the hammer, makes the right decisions and puts us in a situation in a place that we can win. But I definitely feel like we definitely have the right bag of hammers. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So
I think so.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, Tommy.
All right. Yeah. Thank you.
Take care, man.